prayers. He acknowledged that deep divisions remain on campus and urged affiliates to embrace each other as the university anticipates another tumultuous semester. At issue are the campus protest over the war in Gaza, where Garber and other top university leaders have said that they have a lower level of tolerance for campus protests this semester. The remarks come after the 20-day encampment in Harvard Yard last spring and a walkout featuring more than 1,000 students during commencement. In sports, the Red Sox in New York wrapping up their series with the Mets tonight. Sunny near 80 today, clear upper 50s overnight, then sunny mid-70s tomorrow, sun clouds low 70s on Friday. 73 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Walton Family Foundation, working to create access to opportunity for people and communities by tackling tough social and environmental problems. More information is at waltonfamilyfoundation.org.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow we're going to be joined in Brighton by Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Friday at the Boston Public Library we're going to have another edition of Ask the Governor with Maura Healey, mentioned as being a possible Attorney General. She's going to be with us here at the Boston Public Library, taking our questions and yours. And Tuesday, we're going to be joined back here at the library by Michelle Wu, the Mayor of Boston.
Yeah, hi Marjorie, how are you?
I'm good.
Can I ask, you often deal with misconceptions about the library. Almost every day it aggravates me. You say you don't need tickets, you don't need an RSVP.
Yeah.
Can I clarify one of their misconceptions? I want you to confirm with me this is accurate, because the crowd is relatively sparse today.
I know.
If you come here, you will not be served with an arrest warrant. Is that correct? I think that's a misconception.
Yeah, my feelings are hurt, Jim.
Oh, my God. In any case, nice to see you, Marjorie.
Nice to see you, too.
On a much more serious topic, in Israel, as you know, hundreds of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets to call for Prime Minister Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire and bring the remaining hostages home. A recent hostage rescue attempt resulted in Hamas executing 6 people held captive, including a 23-year-old American-Israeli citizen, and Carmel Gott, whose family we've spoken to several times. Here's Carmel's brother, Alon Gott, who was with us a couple of weeks ago.
There were 2 other hostages, youngsters that were with Carmel in captivity, with my sister. And they told us that Carmel initiated yoga practices and mindfulness with the other hostages, and they helped each other raise their spirit.
And by the way, Alon, who you just heard, is the husband of Yarden Roman Gott, who was held hostage for 57 days before she was released, and their mother, by the way, was executed by Hamas. The Biden-Harris administration is pushing for a take-it-or-leave-it ceasefire proposal as Netanyahu faces global outcry for sustaining the war solely, according to many, to protect his own political power. Joining us to discuss the latest is Charlie Sennett. Charlie's the founder of the Ground Truth Project and a BPR and a GBH News analyst. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Marjorie.
Hey, Charlie, thank you for joining us. So we've all seen pictures of these massive rallies in Israel, huge rallies, huge upset, huge strikes. There seems to be a sentiment among many of these protesters that they want Netanyahu to compromise in allowing these hostages to get out of there. But what do you make of what's the situation? Can you explain what's going on now?
Yeah, so the general strike was big. I mean, this was 800,000 Israelis represented in that union. So they were shutting down transportation, they were shutting down schools. Really a powerful statement and a call for a ceasefire, but that has ended. It's fizzled out. And it appears that the call for unity, the sense that Israel wants to be unified, has had more weight in the streets than the strike and the call for a ceasefire. And so it looks like Netanyahu has once again navigated his way to survival. He is all about his own political survival. That really is argued really convincingly in a bunch of editorials in the New York Times today, including one by Tom Friedman, that basically that's all the Bibi doctrine is his own political survival. And also to ensure that Trump is elected and that Kamala Harris is defeated, and there's a real sense of politics at play here that is complex and well spelled out, I think, by Tom Friedman in the New York Times.
Just put this in
The bottom line is,
What's that?
strike didn't work.
What didn't work?
The strike, the call for the strike did
didn't
not work in trying to bring about the ceasefire. And Bibi's really dug in. He's really dug in for the security reasons that he's not going to give up that corridor that's about 8 miles long that separates Gaza and Egypt. That's been one of the conditions of Hamas to release the hostages. Netanyahu is saying, no, it's too important to the security of the country. And that seems to be gaining popularity inside of Israel, where this unity, this sense that it was the fractured Israel that resulted in the weakness that led to the Hamas attack. That's a common perception now inside Israel. And Netanyahu is speaking to that, and he's doing so apparently convincingly.
A couple of things. One, just to put in context, this huge showing, you described roughly 800,000 people, Charlie. There are 10 million people in Israel. An 800,000 person rally in the United States would be roughly 30 million people as a percentage of our population. So it is not huge. It is immense. It is historically immense. And you mentioned this border issue, which Netanyahu is hanging his hat on. From my reading, Charlie, virtually all the generals in Israel are saying that this maintaining a presence on this southern Egyptian Gaza border is not critical to Israel's self-defense and national security, despite what the prime minister is saying.
Yeah, I know that there are generals who have said that. I do think there is also, there are a lot of people in the military establishment and in the political establishment who accept Bibi's idea that they're not going to back down from that corridor, that is the corridor through which Hamas has been able to smuggle weapons back and forth from Egypt for a long time, and that the only way they can put Hamas out of business for the long run is to secure that and shut down those tunnels permanently. That is rational. I do think Bibi's using it as a way to continue to just hold the line, and it's working for him. The internal politics of this are that Bibi is solidifying his base, his hardcore base, by doing that. The choices here are so agonizing, and I don't know if your readers will remember this, but one of the things that is, I think, really interesting and important to remember is just how these deals work, right? So in 2006, there was an Israeli soldier named Gilad Shalit who was captured, if you remember. 5 years later, he was released in exchange for 1,000 prisoners.
One Israeli soldier, one.
One Israeli soldier, right. 1,000 Palestinian security prisoners were released. And one of those released was Sinwar, who is the architect of the October 7th attack. So these hostage deals and the release of Palestinian militants in exchange for Israelis being held, it has a big tradition. It really is something that the country is just in this bind, and the history haunts it. And I don't think any figure haunts the whole thing more than the Gilad Shalit deal that resulted in the release of Sinwar.
Charlie, help me understand this. We just talked about 10% of Israel, 800,000 people in a country with 10 million people out in the street. This outpouring of anguish over these 6 hostages that were apparently shot at close range by Hamas just a couple of days before they might have been rescued, or might have been in that next group of people that was going to be out. But at the same time, with people like Alan Gott, who was on our show, said he was so enraged by Netanyahu, he wouldn't accept his invitation to come with him to Washington.
He wouldn't fly on the same plane with Netanyahu, even though the prime minister invited him to join him. So
I don't get this. Where is the unity here? Is it that we're just counting these protesters?
Well, I think the far right and Netanyahu's party, and a lot of conservative Israelis feel like the unity of the country really matters. And look, those protesters on the street demanding a ceasefire so that the hostages can be released, their cries are profound and important and moral, and I get it. But this is a place that is being torn apart. I mean, Israel is really, really frayed as a result of all of this, to put it mildly. But when you think about like the voice of Carmel that you had on before, or the voice of Hirsch's family, one of those the young American who was killed among these 6 who were killed. The agony of all of that is just almost unfathomable. It's almost impossible to imagine what those Israeli families are going through. We have to care so much about the Palestinian civilians who go through so many deaths. What is it, 40,000 now? And the numbers are climbing. The tragedy of this war, the cost, the human cost is escalating. And I just fear, because of the politics of it, I don't see it ending anytime soon. I think that it'll play out right through the election. And I think, this argument that Netanyahu is trying to save himself and to elect Trump is convincing. And I'd encourage people who want to rely on someone who really knows the region. It's very complex political math, but the column by Tom Friedman today in the Times takes you through why he sees that Netanyahu is that cynical, that he's trying to save his own political life. And he's going to keep with this hostage crisis.
Charlie, we have less than a minute left, but really quickly, I'm getting text messages now. I get them all the time about what about the Palestinians? And on the world stage, it doesn't seem to me Israel is doing itself huge favors because there is the horror of October 7th and the horror of the hostages, and then these little kids trying to get polio vaccines over in Gaza,
right,
and they're starving to death. I mean, what about that consideration?
Yeah, no, the callers, people who are texting or calling in, they're right. I mean, look, I think we've said on this program many times that all of us have to be able to hold both of these things in our heart at the same time. That the Israeli families and the agony they feel for their hostages, the threat that Israel feels to its existence, can be held in your heart at the same time you say that what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza is a moral outrage, and there are
and in the West
absolutely
Bank
war crimes being committed there against civilian populations who are also innocent, just like those hostages who were taken. It is a torturous equation. It's really difficult. Sadly, I just don't see that there's any, to use a terrible metaphor, light at the end of these tunnels. This is just going to be with us through this election, I fear, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Charlie, you're going to rejoin us on Friday, and on Friday we'll talk about that very topic, including whether Joe Biden could be doing more to put pressure on Netanyahu before the elections here. Charlie Sennett, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. We've been speaking with Charlie Sennett, Ground Truth Project founder and a GBH News analyst. And as Jim just said, we're going to talk to him again on Friday.
See the CNN headline right behind you? You want to read it?
Israeli newspaper documents show Netanyahu spiked potential hostage deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Up next, this is a difficult transition from that tragic situation over there, but nonetheless, school has started in most towns. We're going to talk a little bit about going back to school for many of the kids and check in. And we want to ask you specifically, too, about this growing movement around the country to ban the use of cell phones in schools. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Paralympics are underway in Paris, and one athlete to watch is the returning champion Oksana Masters. She's won 17 medals for Team USA, but she dedicates her victories to her native home of Ukraine.
It's no longer just about me chasing a gold medal. I'm on the start line representing Ukraine.
We'll have her story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org. And Heal Veterinary Clinic in Watertown, committed to providing their clients with conversation-focused visits and caring for pets with low-stress animal handling techniques. Heal Vet, a better experience for you and your pet. Heal.vet.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, Senator Warren joins us in Brighton. Friday, the governor joins us for an hour here at the Boston Public Library to take your questions and ours. Monday, Philip Eng, the general manager of the T, joins us for an hour to take your questions. And Tuesday, the mayor of Boston, that would be Michelle Wu, joins us at the library to take your questions as well.
Busy week, Jim.
Before we move, well, it's next week too, that's true. Well, that is a week, that's a very good point. In any case, a reminder, we're doing something new on the show as of yesterday. We'll have a GBH and NPR newscast again at 1 o'clock and a new segment at the end of this noon hour driven by your text to 877-301-8970. Each day we'll pose a different question for you to text us about. Here's today's. Dating apps seem to be universally hated, and the pineapple is a sign, as we learned recently from Christopher Muther, the travel writer for the Globe, that you're open to whatever. So text us, are you ditching dating apps for putting a pineapple upside down in your grocery cart? Did you even know about this? And what do you think about the method? Right now, though, we're talking about parents. As Marjorie said, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy had this piece in the New York Times, I think we mentioned it yesterday, warning about, that was in the past, about social media and kids. And now, yesterday, he's warning that it's the parents who aren't all right. A lot of stress. School is back in session around the state this week, so we want to check in on the parents and kids dealing with this change, from rush school drop-offs to districts banning cell phone use or possession. Some schools across the country instituting strict dress codes. How are you dealing with the return to school? And specifically, Margie and I are particularly interested. Apparently, 25% of the districts in the country have some limitation on cell phones. And we want to know, do you consider that to be a huge step in the right direction as we do? Or does it cause you even more stress to know that your little darling does not have a cell phone, which would allow him or her to call you during the day? 877-301-8970. Do you remember those thrilling days of yesteryear when you were returning your little kidlings to school?
I do. I was very excited because they were all back to school.
Out of the house, yeah.
Peace and quiet around the house. But my kids were not there when cell phone use was so prevalent. I mean, they were, I guess, by maybe middle school or high school, but everybody's got cell phones now, and 72% of teachers think that this is a major problem in the classroom. So I do think, the rejoinder from parents is they want to be able to get in charge of their kids in an emergency, but, as awful as...
What's the example? Do you have an example? Do you know of an example where the ability of a child during an emergency to contact their parent immediately with their cell phone did anything that couldn't have been done had they not had a cell phone by raising their hand?
People are talking about school shootings, Jim.
And what's that going to do?
That they can text their parents.
And what's that going to do?
But they might cause them more trouble because they can be heard.
Maybe they should focus on the situation, right?
The thing is, you don't want to operate like every school in America is going to be invaded by a guy with a long rifle and start shooting everybody. I mean, the issue is that kids aren't learning in school. Social media is overwhelming their learning experience. That is a pervasive problem, and thank God we are not yet at the point where every school is going to be have somebody with a long gun at the entranceway. So I think that argument is ridiculous. If there's some emergency at home, like mom drops dead or dad drops dead.
Well, it's a little late. If the mother drops dead, I don't think it matters if you find out immediately or a little bit later.
You know what you do?
Yeah.
You do what you do in the olden days. You call the high school, you get the secretary in the office of the principal on the phone, and you have them go get your kid.
Yeah. I don't think the cell phone thing about your parent dropping dead is really a primary issue for most people.
Well, I think the emergency they're talking about is shootings, but the other thing would be some catastrophe at home, and we can still use phones for those catastrophes.
How about dress codes? Your favorite dress codes?
Well, the thing about
growing number of schools doing dress codes, by the way.
The thing about dress codes is there's so much social media stuff now on the latest thing you have to have. This is cool, that's cool, the other thing's cool. These cool things tend to cost a lot of money. It's a great equalizer to me, especially before high school. Like in middle school, there was a school that used to have in Boston that used to have these little uniforms. Kids were in khaki pants, just blue.
Public school?
Yeah, but it's charter school.
Oh.
And they wore shirts. What do you call those shirts? Golf shirts, whatever you call those
Polos,
things.
we call them.
Shirts.
Thank you.
And polo shirts. I think girls could wear slacks or skirts, whatever they wanted to wear. But it's a great equalizer. And then you could, decorate, like in the Catholic school, you decorate the shoelaces and your saddle shoes.
How about creativity?
Who
cares about creativity?
Be creative in other ways. I don't think you have to be. And I think I do like
See,
school
let me tell you
uniforms.
why I think you're wrong about this. I think when you get the phone call at school to find out your mother's dead, you really, I mean, isn't that your concern? You really want to be in an outfit that makes you feel as 877-301-8970. What are your concerns or your joys or your stresses as your kids are returning to school?
One last thing. There's this poor beleaguered mother who wrote this piece in USA Today about how back-to-school shopping cost her $1,000.
Is that unbelievable, by the way?
And the school supply stuff and the clothing. But the other problem is, too, you almost have to have a laptop or a tablet now in school, and those are obviously lots of money. 877-301-8970 is the phone number. How do you feel about banning schools and banning phones in the school? I think they should get rid of them. But that's just me, and my kids aren't in school anymore.
How do you feel, by the way, when we both praised in passing yesterday the Surgeon General for writing these op-eds about loneliness, about social media impact on kids, and now talking about stress not on the kids, but the parents. You know, obviously it's not like legislation. There's not a thing that is achieved. I think it's fabulous for a Surgeon General, even if nobody, for the most part, knows who he or she is, to focus attention on things like this and start discussion. Do you, or is it a big nothing? Surgeon General.
The Surgeon General, I think, I like him a lot. I like that he weighs in on all these things. So here's Joe from Lynn. Taking phones away is a non-solution. Everyone's in favor of taking phones away until they get in touch with their kid mid-mass shooting. I mean, there you go. People are really obsessed with the mass shooting thing. And then there's Karina from Newton. I have a senior in high school. She found out about no use of cell phones at all during school except during lunch. A day before school started. I didn't know they were even doing that in Newton. And she said this will be great for her because if everyone cannot use their phone, then she does not feel pressured to respond right away to friends, that she would be able to pay more attention to her classes. So it's going great in my house with no phone usage in school.
Can I respond to the first texter, and I'll say it as respectfully as I possibly can? Is there any dumber argument in this whole thing about the school shooting? There's two things. One, they almost never happen. Two, they're almost never of help if your kid has a cell phone. And three, all you do is traumatize your child. Is you say the reason you're taking a cell phone and why I'm going to fight the school or district's effort to take it away from you is because when there's a mass shooting at your school. Let's go to James in JP, Jamaica Plain. James, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you for both.
I'm the father of a I'm the father of a 4-year-old who he's in private pre-K now, but he's going to be a BPS kindergartner in fall of 2025. And I just want to say I 100% hope that the state of Massachusetts bans all cell phones from schools. I think it leads to bullying, and the social media is just kind of making kids into vegetables. And I don't think it's a good thing overall for learning and young brains.
Love every word you said. James, thanks for your first call. Make another one soon. 877-301-8970.
Here's Nancy from Scituate. I walk around the high school fields in Scituate. Today I saw many girls in shorts that were as small as their underwear. Must be a distraction for the boys. And then somebody texts about these Yoder pouches. I don't know how you pronounce it. YONDR.
I don't know.
They're lock away. You put the phones in the pouches.
Oh, yeah.
You lock
like
them
a
away.
theater. Some theaters have those too.
And uniforms are awesome. Marjorie is right. They're equalizing and remove a large amount of stress from a young person's life about their family's economic or social status. Many kids also compete with sneakers. I am for uniform shoes as well. They can wear whatever they want after school is over.
You know, one of your best columns ever, I don't know if it was when you were at the Herald or the Globe, did you coin the term prostitute when talking about young girls who are dressed?
No. I think it might have been
You
Jennifer.
used it,
I think
though.
it might have been Jennifer Lopez.
Really?
I think so. I think she had a
It's so
song.
great.
I think she had a song about prostitutes or something.
I like it.
Yeah, but that's you discovered that. You got a little girl and she's like in first grade. You go into the 6X sizes and they're like bare midriffs and they're leopard prints and it's like, oh my God, do we have to start when we're 6? John in Hopkinton, thank you for calling.
Hello, John. Welcome.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I was a teacher out of Martha's Vineyard for years, and I agree that they should get rid of the phones. I remember having somebody take MCAT, and he's on the phone. So, I mean, obviously you could cheat with it, you could call somebody, you could text somebody for the answers, but the school administration should have set it up that the teachers could just call somebody, and they come from the office and get the phone immediately, because otherwise the teacher has to stop what he's doing, talk to the kid, get in an argument, call the office, wait for somebody to be free. But if they thought about this 20 years ago, I don't know why they didn't think about it 20 years ago. It was pretty evident.
You know, I hate the expression no-brainer, so I'm about to use it anyway. If there was ever no-brainer about what should happen in schools, to me it's this. It is about the easiest thing ever, not just for reasons you as a former teacher mentioned, but let the kid focus and not be doing whatever they're doing on their phone. John, thank you very much for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
You know, in some places they're really going wild. Like places like Alabama, they're banning, you can't wear tights, you can't wear sunglasses, you can't wear headbands. I mean, they're really going crazy down there. But one of the things
that they also did in Alabama, did you read that story?
The mirrors.
No. They had to, every kid has to have the 10 Commandments tattooed on their left thigh. Did you read that?
No, I missed that, Jim.
No,
but they talk about one of the other things they're banning in this one Alabama school system is bathroom mirrors.
I read that.
Because apparently, a lot of schools I've gone to, the mirrors aren't regular mirrors.
Yeah, I don't know, it's like metal mirror kind of thing.
Weird.
Yeah,
it's a metal mirror. But apparently bathrooms with real mirrors have become a meetup place, and that all sorts of kids are hanging out in the bathrooms making videos of themselves while they're in the bathroom in front of the mirror. And once they banned mirrors, it said that the time spent in the bathroom came down dramatically. So I guess that is true.
Do you think Jamie was making a video when he was locked in the men's room for 4 hours a couple of months ago? Were you making a video during that? He says no. I don't know if it's true. Christian, you're from wherever you are. Stowe, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
So just a couple of points. The first point I'll make is that phones are a huge distraction for kids no matter where they are. So my preference is that they don't have them during school, but many kids, once they get to middle school, have to do things after school and they have to coordinate. So having a mechanism where they can check in their phones and then receive them after school so that they can then make contact. And then finally, there are other alternatives. There are smartwatches that can be regulated so that they can't be using them during the school day, but then they can make phone calls after school and do that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, Christian, I hate to be, sort of 1960-ish, but the simplest solution, as you say, is non-technological. Give up your phone when the day starts and get your phone back when the day's over, period, right? I mean,
exactly.
Isn't it? Christian, thank you so much for the call. They do that, Jared, Wilbur Theater, don't they? Is it the Wilbur? Where do they take your phone when you're walking
I've been to places where they take your phones.
Yeah, a couple of these places. They take your phone, they put it in a pouch, and when you leave, you undo the pouch, give them the thing, and you take your phone back.
You can't get it out until the end of the production. I think there's a lot of time when they're going to film it or something like that. That John Mulaney guy, we all have to give up our phones.
He doesn't like that?
No, he was filming it for a Netflix special. He didn't want any phone distractions during the Netflix special, so you had to give up your phone.
Huh.
And it was great because, people abuse it, don't they? When you go to the theater, they do abuse it. Sue from Sharon, thank you for calling.
Hi, Sue.
Hi. Wanted to just concur with Jim, a school nurse of many years, and the chaos that erupts when a child receives a call from his parents, or vice versa, when a parent receives an emergency call from his child, could be enormously alleviated by going through the extraordinary staff in the office. The other thing is, in an emergency, as you mentioned, Jim, children need to be paying attention to what's being told from the teacher's position. They need to give them directions, and they need to receive directions. And if they're on the phone with mom and dad who are crying and screaming and whatever, it's not going to work.
Hey, Sue, before you go away, as a school nurse of some time, do most parents with whom you have this discussion about seizing is the wrong verb, but taking cell phones or not allowing them in school, do they have a problem with that, or do they buy in?
There are very few in number, and I think that if it became school rule, there would be no discussion. Schools just have to step up to the plate, make the big move, and put those phones in a box.
I'm with you.
Or not even bring them to school.
Sue, thanks for what you do, and thanks for the call.
I do remember one instance where a child was using a cell phone during the emergency, and it was in Uvalde. Remember that little girl that was on the phone with 911?
What'd that do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
She kept calling, and and they were on the phone with her, and it didn't matter.
Because the cops didn't do their job.
Yeah, Sharon from Millis, thank you for calling.
Hey, Sharon.
Hey, so I have a middle schooler, and sorry, I'm hearing echoes. Is that
We
me?
hear you fine. I hope you can work through it.
Great.
We're good.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've got a middle schooler, and I used to teach high school for about 10 years ago. And so my middle schooler just got her phone for the first time, and just looking back, the whole cell phone issue was the worst thing that I had to deal with as a teacher. And honestly, one of the main reasons that I would not consider going back unless I was at a school where they were completely banned.
Really?
Just the talk back, the arguments, it just was such a big issue in the classroom that it really colored the whole experience for me.
Well, Sharon, I mean, these stories all talk about the vast majority of high school teachers say the exact same thing. It's a major problem in the classroom, and kids are and outside the classroom, in the playground or the place next door to the school, they're all videotaping everybody fist fighting with each other after school. So that's not,
Hey,
that's
Sharon,
not great either.
thanks for your call. How come you're not using this opportunity to badmouth the teachers union?
I don't know if the teachers union has a.
That's never stopped
Does
you.
Max Page have a stance on
Whatever
cell
it is,
phones?
I'm sure you're against it. Is that not true? By the way, you know who the parents are?
You know what, Jim?
What?
If he said it was get rid of him, I'd be with him.
I doubt that. I'm with him regardless. Let me just say one more thing. Is you know who these people are? I just realized when that former teacher was just calling about the parents who object to this thing. Remember we were talking yesterday that in some survey over the weekend, 20% of adult children, if it's not oxymoronic, 20% of grown-up kids take their parent to their first job interview. Don't you think that's the exact same parent who objects to the kid not having the cell phone?
Well,
in school?
I get the being scared.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
I do.
No, scared is one thing. Demanding that they have a cell phone is a totally different kind of thing.
There's a step between being worried about your kid's safety in school, worried about their safety walking to school, worried about their safety on the bus, and then demanding that the solution to that is to have a cell phone that they can call you. And what exactly are you going to do? Are you going to race down there and tackle
exactly my point.
The shooter? I don't think so.
Okay, we're taking a break, Marjorie.
We're taking a break. We're talking about back-to-school stuff. How do you feel about cell phones
we're not.
in school?
We're actually not. No,
we're
done.
not. Oh, we're done.
See that guy? Look at that guy right there. Looks like a model. Look at him. Look at him. Who is he?
He does look like a model.
You're looking good today, Jared.
Jared is
You're
a good-looking
looking
guy.
really good today, Jared.
Okay. You better turn on YouTube so you can see for yourself what I'm talking about.
Jared
Bowen,
really
executive arts editor here at GBH, is next. He's going to tell us about a new biopic on Donald Trump's life, which is aptly named The Apprentice. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public.
When news impacts your community.
Quincy's Faith Lutheran Church let 7 migrant families stay in tents in their garden, but the city told them the families had to go.
GBH News sticks with the story.
We stepped in to meet an immediate need as it was unfolding.
A nonprofit group was able to place the families in a hotel over the weekend, but their future housing status is uncertain.
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate, empowering seniors to reach their full potential with a wide range of services. You can discover senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more at allweareforyou.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In 30 minutes, former federal judge Nancy Gertner is going to join us here at the library to sort out what's going on with the Trump legal matters, including a scheduled sentencing in the New York case for those felony convictions for September 18th. Tomorrow, Elizabeth Warren joins us. Friday, the governor joins us for an hour here. Monday, the head of the T joins us for an hour somewhere, I don't know where. And Tuesday, back in Brighton. And Tuesday, the mayor joins us, Mayor Wu, here at the library for an hour. And a reminder, at the end of the 12 o'clock hour, we're going to do that new text thing where you text in your thoughts about this question, about ditching dating apps in favor of putting a pineapple upside down in your grocery cart market basket to show that you're available. Did you ever do that, Jared? I would say you probably know quite a bit about it, actually. In any case, we're joined now by Jared Bowen, GBH Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show, which I hope you know airs daily at 2 o'clock right after us on 89.7. Hello, Jared Bowen.
Hello.
Hello, Jared Bowen.
My mic was muted for the pineapple. John McLaughlin Parker was trying to save me from myself.
Yes. Would you like to add anything to the pineapple?
Did you ever know about this? We didn't know about it. Christopher Muther mentioned. Well, obviously you did know.
No, remember I came on right after.
And what did you say?
I was claiming that you pretended to not know.
Okay, fine.
But then I looked down and I saw your Amazon shopping cart with all the pineapples in it.
Yeah, Jim's been at the market basket hot bar for years.
Let's move
hoping
on.
something
Thank you.
would materialize.
Thank you.
Had any luck so far, Jim?
Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, Marjorie, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Jared, we'll get in the mood here. Here's a little clip from the Apprentice biopic. This, of course, is about Donald Trump, with a young Donald, played by Sebastian Stan, trying to do an interview in the back of the car. He's being coached on the side by Roy Cohn, that really devious lawyer that was a big mentor for Trump. And he's played by Jeremy Strong from Succession.
Wow.
Here's the clip.
Very excited to talk to you.
Donald, now that the lawsuit's behind you, what do you want to do next?
Well, I intend to acquire the Commodore, and I'm planning on making it the best and the finest building in the city, maybe the country, in the world. Judy, in the world, it's going to be the finest building in the world. It's going to be a spectacular hotel, absolutely spectacular.
Boy, that guy is horrible.
Horrible. I think they should have gotten Alec Baldwin instead.
Is he a friend of yours or something?
No, but for the few people who have seen this film, and of course this is why we're talking about it, they rave about his performance.
Really?
Sebastian
Have you
Stan,
seen this thing?
No, I can't see it.
And why are people like you not able to see this? It's opening on October 11th, is that right?
October 11th, finally. So people may not understand what happened with this film. This film was made like any other Hollywood film where you had a creative team who came together. They cast it well, Sebastian Stan, Jeremy Strong. They made the film, and often when it's a more independent film, you go to film festivals and then you wait for a studio to pick it up and then it gets released. Well, they did that. Then they brought it to Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival in France in May, and it got this tremendous response. People really liked the film. By the way, to back up a little bit, it tells the story of Donald Trump in his 20s, as you said, Marjorie, under the mentorship of Roy Cohn, and then he surpasses Roy Cohn in terms of fame and life, and takes us through his marriage to Ivana. It generated controversy because it deals with the sexual assault that she once described happened to her by him in her marriage. She later changed her description of that, but elements were worked into the movie. So it gets this huge applause, gets this great review, gets all these great reviews in Cannes, but then nobody wants to pick it up. So this is the reason I haven't seen it. This is the reason most people in
nobody
America,
wants to be a distributor.
Exactly. Most of the studios, so Sony, Focus, A24, Netflix, MGM, Amazon Prime Video, nobody wanted to pick this film up.
Because?
There are a few different reasons. One, right away the Trump team said that they were going to sue. There was a cease and desist order issued. To date, no lawsuit has materialized, probably because they feel that there's no grounds because he is a public figure, so there is a fair use quality to this or quotient to this. But also, I think that all of these studios were very afraid of releasing this film, and then what would happen to them? What would the repercussions be if he became president? Because he could bring the hammer down on them in industry.
Oh,
so in effect, this is a level of censorship that happened. Granted, it wasn't the government doing this, but it was the system, the film system. But finally, this group came together. It's Briarcliff Entertainment, and
was that Spotlight? Were they the Spotlight people?
Spotlight and W and Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. So this is a person who's accustomed to films generating some level of controversy. So now it will get released on October 11th with the help of a Kickstarter campaign, by the way.
You know, before we leave this and your aggravation, which I share that you weren't able to see this in advance, not coming. I mean, by the way, there is an issue about it coming out on October 11th, but maybe that's not the filmmakers.
But here's the irony: if they hadn't created this controversy, this could have been
come
released
out a lot
last
earlier. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Okay, forget that. But Roy Cohn, for the few people who, particularly young people, don't know who he is, his claim to infamy is obviously his work on the House Un-American Activities Committee with Senator McCarthy. But if you haven't seen the brilliant Frontline specials, The Choice, that are done by our friend Michael Kirk, he's going to be with us in a couple of weeks about this year's.
For this one.
2 hours on each of the major candidates. And you think you know everything about Trump and this, well, maybe you don't about Harris, but you always think you know everything until you watch Michael's film. One of the things that Michael talked about is that Roy Cohn taught Donald Trump everything. Remember, they lose this housing discrimination case, I think in New York City, on virtually every front, discriminating against black tenants or would-be black tenants. And Cohn's notion is you just loudly and relentlessly lie about the outcome. They came out and said, as Trump does now, we won everything, essentially, and that's been his claim to fame. So many people think the worst of Donald Trump's interaction with the public was mentored and taught to him by Roy Cohn.
Well, here's what's also interesting, and because so many people haven't seen it, there are people who say this wouldn't be as controversial as Donald Trump and Republicans might think, because they also deal with the fact that in the 1980s, not only was he palling around with Roy Cohn, but he was also palling around with people like Barbara Walters and a lot of other people who were exalting him as this great celebrity, this young upshot in New York who was brash and was going to change the city. So they helped build that cult of personality. And from what I understand, a lot of that is depicted in this film too. So it's an origin story. And the filmmaker has said this is as much about America, this is more about American politics and the American political system and how it creates figures than it is necessarily about one particular figure. Of
You
course,
going to go
that's his
see this
view.
thing?
Of course.
Okay, so am I.
But
By the way, there's a sort of horrible irony. There's been a school shooting at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. Some people are apparently being taken to the hospital. We don't know the details. That's according to CNN, and we'll bring you more. I'm sorry, Marjorie. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to say that how much of Trump's success as a political candidate, he was able to manage those TV bona fides on The Apprentice, right?
Yeah, it was the books, it was the board game that became the interviews, that became the television show.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people voted for him the first time around. It had to do with seeing him for years on The Apprentice, because for a while it was a big hit, right?
Well, and he knows how to be a boss, so clearly he can be the boss of us.
Okay,
can we mention one more thing about Cohn that's particularly reprehensible? Because I just got back from Provincetown where he spent a decent amount of time. Remember, he and McCarthy were outing gays in government, and many of whom, according to reports, ended up committing suicide because of the outing.
And ruining their careers.
And Roy Cohn was gay, which makes it, not that it wouldn't have been horrible had he been straight, but doubly nauseating about a guy, again, who helped form the character of a guy who wants to be president again.
Okay, two things. First of all, an anonymous texter just says,
what?
Jared Bowen looks just like Rob Lowe
today. Yeah, you're looking pretty good today.
Very good.
Is that like a paint-on tan, or where's the tan from?
No, it's a tan from being outside.
Wow.
Because I was trying to enjoy the last of summer.
He looks really. How do you think he looks today?
I think he looks great. He always looks great.
Fabulous.
He's a very handsome guy.
Fabulous.
And I want to know about this. Not today, but for the next time you appear, whenever you can see this, the Nicole Kidman film.
Oh.
Hubba, hubba, hubba.
There's some,
sounds really something, right?
Yeah, she's been very daring. So same for
we should say, by the way,
Daniel
there's
Craig.
this film that's playing at this. Is it not Cannes? No, is it Cannes?
There were a couple.
We're supposed to be the
there
most
was Telluride
explicit
in
sex
Venice.
scenes. Baby Girl, is that what it's called?
Baby Girl.
Baby Girl.
Yeah.
And then there was one big one in Venice with Daniel Craig, also very explicit sex scenes. Luca Guadagnino, who did Call Me By Your Name. Yeah, so
it's also great. She's not a kid, by the way. She's like 57 or something. Yeah.
But supposedly she's barely there during the entire movie. People said it was a really good movie, and they were talking about erotica coming back big time to film. I read that somewhere, Jim.
We talked about that on the Culture Show.
We talked about that in the Culture Show. Well,
by the way, when the movie's released, we're going to spend, I don't know, no more than 11 or 12 hours talking about it. So please,
we'll have a field
please
trip.
stay tuned
Right?
to the show. We're talking to Jared Bowen, the head of the Culture Show, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so tell us about this AI and how AI is not really going to be able to excel in the art world. I hope that's right.
Well, so there is this piece in The New Yorker that is really a think piece. It's titled Why AI Isn't Going to Make Art by Ted Chiang. And it's making the argument that if you really distill all of this, AI, as we've talked about, is an algorithm, and it's making art basically by scavenging the internet and pulling up all of the images it can to create. In other words, it really can't, it argues, innovate and create new things, because the only things that can be created new are by humans. It can then take that and morph it. I think there are some exceptions to that. You can see this piece on view at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which people, I don't know if you both have been there, or I'm sure some of our listeners have been, and you see hundreds of people crowded in the lobby looking at this AI-conceived piece, done also with an artist, but it basically takes a lot of work from the permanent collection.
But there's an acknowledgement that there's an AI. Okay, go ahead.
And so what this article is looking at is AI obviously is going to be here, but it is how do we use it going forward, and it will never supplant the human touch, although this takes into consideration the number of people we're reading about who are writing letters or who are doing school essays by going on to ChatGPT and having it do all of these things. But the argument that he and others are now making is this could actually elevate us in a way by helping us, by having us learn in the way that books help people learn. You become a better writer, you become a better reader by reading more and more books. So how is AI any different? Obviously, this is a 12-hour conversation in and of itself, but this is the encapsulation of it. But I think we're starting to see more measured looks at the future of AI, in particular in art.
By the way, I think it's a stupid piece. And no, I do, because he's writing for somebody like you who, and you actually were a big art history type, so you might notice, for the average consumer of art, like when I go to a museum, I don't know, I mean, a high quality AI rendering of something is not, I'm not going to have the skills to...
No, I think you would.
I would?
Well, if you're, especially, think about painting. If you get up close to a painting, you see the brush strokes. You see how the...
So why can't AI do brush strokes?
Because it's just going to be a flat image. It's going to be like looking at a photograph.
Oh, you mean you see physically, not just the image. You see the raised brush strokes. Okay.
And some of the other articles recently have talked about how so much of AI looks the same because you have kind of the same...
Because they're borrowing from similar resources.
Same materials and the kind of the same inputs by people. You know, give me a dog barking at the sun in the style of Andy Warhol. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not getting that clever with your inputs, then you're not going to get very clever art. But at the same point, they also talk about this artist who just had a show at the Gagosian Gallery, which was the one that if you called the gallery and they answered the phone, it was Gagosian. They had to sound completely dejected because apparently that's the sound and the intonation of the art world. But at Gagosian, he looked at some 100,000 plus images and distilled and kept distilling with instructions until he got down to about 20. And that became his show.
So, Jerry Bowen, I want to talk about this painter, Guillaume Lethiere, if I'm saying it right.
Lethiere, yep.
Lethiere, excuse me, who lived from 1760 to 1832. And he was from the Caribbean. He was a man of color, but who had a spectacular career in those years before the Civil War here in France.
Yeah, this is an incredible story, and it all comprises an exhibition at the Clark Art Institute in Williamstown. This is on view through October 14th, before it goes to Paris, before it goes on view at the Louvre. In fact, this is in collaboration with the Louvre, and it's our great joy that we have it here in Massachusetts beforehand. But this is somebody who has been around, obviously, for years. His huge paintings, his huge history paintings have been hanging in the Louvre, but nobody ever really looked at them and thought, wait, who is this person? How did he get here? So this is a major excavation. So again, it's the work of Guillaume Lethiere, and he grew up in the Caribbean, and he was the son of a plantation owner and likely of an enslaved mother, and he evidently demonstrated great artistic prowess from a very early age. So his father brought him to Paris, where he immersed himself in the artistic circles. He was an extraordinary painter, did very well in competitions trying to get into the salons, and ended up having a very, very prolific career because his race didn't matter as much in Paris at the time, and he also used that to his effect. So he was able to bring a lot of the people from the Caribbean into his community in France. There are some layers to this too, because ultimately he inherited the plantation from his father, which made things very complicated. They're still excavating a lot of this history. There's a lot that's still not known about him, so hopefully this opens the door to it. But he does these major, major paintings, major portraits, has a great friendship with the family of Napoleon, and goes on to have a great friendship with Dumas, of course, he was the father of the man who wrote Three Musketeers. It just became, he was in these immense circles, and at a time where who he came from and what he was when he was born didn't matter in Paris as an artist.
You rarely, at least I rarely read in a high-profile publication language like this. Is James Farago, is that how you say the guy's name, who wrote this review for the New York Times. Far from the Bastille, at the Clark Art Institute in the Berkshires, one of the most remarkable exhibitions I've seen in years. Punches right at the heart of today's altercations about nationality and democracy, culture and politics. It's really incredible. That's one of the museums that's part of that Western Mass semi-consortium thing where you can go out and get tickets and go to Clark. Am I right about this?
Oh, actually, I didn't even know about the consortium.
I think so.
But that
Mass
makes sense.
Mocha and all. I think there's a deal. By the way, can I just update something? The initial report that I had heard about this shooting, Appalachia's being walked back a little bit. The latest reports, I think from the wire services, that there's a heavy police presence at this high school in Barrow County, in Georgia. Is that where this is? In Georgia?
Yes.
This comes after reports of gunfire. 6 ambulances could be seen by local news helicopters. Students appear to have been evacuated to the school's football stadium. This is the most important part. There is no word yet on if anyone has been injured at the school. So the original reports that some people have been taken to the hospital apparently are unconfirmed. We're talking to Jared Bowen.
One last thing about this painter. You hear this continually through the art world. So a lot of Black Americans or Afro-Americans from here went to Paris, much later. I mean, they went, obviously he was before the Civil War. James Baldwin is the one I think of, the great writer. But there's a long tradition of American expats of color.
Yeah, well, because they fought in the war and then experienced freedom and lack of course, in World War II there was freedom, but lack of segregation, and realized this was a society much more willing to embrace them. So why return to America when they would hear the stories of other veterans returning home after they'd risked their lives, after they'd suffered injuries, only to be treated with segregation in the Jim Crow South, and realized Europe is a much better place for me. And so a lot of artists went there, but a lot of artists have always gone there, as we've seen, and flourished. In fact, we teased having Sebastian Smee on the Culture Show yesterday, and he was talking about just how many women writers, even though it's not necessarily acknowledged today, that there are vastly more women writers over the last, painters in the last 200 years that are really acknowledged, including one he profiles in his book that led to the birth of Impressionism, Bert Morisot.
He is one beautiful writer. I mean, he is
he won the Pulitzer.
I know,
when he was
he
at the
is
Globe.
just phenomenally
We had interviewed him
talented.
about this great book about the competition among the artists.
The art of rivalry.
Yeah, that art of rivalry was really great.
So, Jared, rather than talking about whatever it is you wanted to talk about, we saw what you have on your Culture Show too. One of our favorite people, and I know one of your close friends, Marianne Leone, is on.
Love her.
And first of all, tell us a little bit about Marianne and tell us why she's on today.
So Marianne Leone is a writer, and she's an actor. She came up in the New York theater scene in the 1970s and 80s. She's from Newton, Massachusetts. She is married to Chris Cooper, the Academy Award-winning actor. She and Chris met when they were in New York in those very, very early days. And they had a son who was disabled. And
Jesse, was that
Jesse.
Jesse, yeah.
And they moved to Massachusetts because Massachusetts was one of the few places in the country where they could go and have a well-funded education for him, for his disability. He died as a teenager. It was just horrible. She walked into his room one January morning and found him. But she's written
They did a beautiful book about him too, right? Yeah.
About Jesse.
Yeah.
And in some ways, this is tracing the years since. So the book is called Five Dog Epiphany, and it looks at how their adoption of rescue dogs over the years carried them through this grief. You'll never get over the grief, of course, of losing a son, but it brought them back into life to some degree. She writes at one point that they are PTSD mirrors.
By the way,
because they were rescue dogs who've been horribly abused in some circumstances.
Beyond being a fabulous person and really talented, for those many people, everybody saw her on The Sopranos, obviously. She's brilliant in The Sopranos. Not to mention the fact, would you all agree she makes the best lemon squares of any human being? Are they the best, sweet item on the planet?
And you're not in Brighton today, so when she brings them, I don't know if there'll be any left for you.
She makes pretty good brownies, too.
Well, let's not talk about those, Marjorie. Okay, so what else besides Marianne? Who else do you have on
so
today?
we'll talk to her about that. But James Bennett takes us to a school, not a school, but a nonprofit in Cambridge that is basically giving a leg up to the next generation of hip hop through lessons and recording and albums. And then with just as the days twinkle down to the presidential election, we take a look at the JFK Library with Mahesh Das, who's a regular on the Culture Show. He's the president of the Boston Architectural College. He's going to talk to us just about how the design of that very distinctive building, now almost, can you believe it's 50 years old.
Is it 50 years old?
Almost.
Oh my God.
They started in the late 70s, and construction started in 79. Of course, this was all fueled by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis as a way to memorialize her husband. So he'll take us through all of the architecture of that building and how it came to be. And I was thinking about it this morning. You look at that, it still seems like it was made yesterday because it's so
that
modern.
Window on the harbor is one of the most beautiful things ever. So, by the way, a CNN update, at least one medical helicopter could be seen airlifting a patient from the scene of local hospitals receiving patients with gunshot wounds related to the incident at the high school.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Nice to see you, Jared.
You do look like Rob Lowe today.
I'll take that. Thank you.
You think he looks like Rob Lowe?
Yeah, absolutely.
He does.
Okay, we've been speaking with Jared Bowen, who looks like Rob Lowe. He is GBH Executive Arts Editor and host of The Culture Show.
He's blushing. Look at him.
Right here on
look at
89.7
him
GBH.
blushing.
His show runs every day at 2 o'clock, and he's here in person on Friday. Well, he's here in person now, but he's here again in person on
Of a legendary hero, he goes on an odyssey to prove his controversial claim is true. Watch Odysseus Returns tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Education Editor Meg Woolhouse, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. It's retired federal judge Nancy Gertner on whether the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling could undo Trump's 36 felony convictions in New York. Plus, what does she think of Maura Healey as Attorney General?
I'm Marjorie Egan. Josh Croak and Worcester drag queen star Daisha Dore Famous join us from the self-described queer Met Gala of Massachusetts, raising funds for youth programming through the nonprofit Love Your Labels. Then it's our brand 18970. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Vice President Kamala Harris is in New Hampshire today to tout a tax credit plan for startups. Ahead of her visit, former President Donald Trump went on Truth Social to suggest the Harris campaign does not a battleground for candidates. Trump insists he'll visit the state before Election Day. Meanwhile, the Republican will be in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania today for a town hall that'll be moderated by Fox News host Sean Hannity. The Justice Department has announced terrorism charges against 6 Hamas leaders, including the architect of the deadly October 7th attack on Israel. NPR's Ryan Lucas reports on the charges unsealed yesterday in federal court in Manhattan.
Among the 6 Hamas leaders charged by criminal complaint is Yahya Sinwar, the group's political chief who is in Gaza. He and the other defendants face 7 charges, including conspiracy to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization and conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals. 3 of the defendants are already dead. The other 3 are unlikely to ever face justice in the U.S. Court papers say Hamas killed at least 43 Americans in the October 7th attack on Israel and took at least 10 Americans hostage. The charges were filed in February, but their announcement comes days after American hostage Hersh Goldberg Poland was killed in Gaza. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the department is investigating his murder and the killings of all Americans. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
A vigil was held in the nation's capital last night for the 6 hostages whose remains were recovered in Gaza over the weekend. Dollar stores are hurting as bargain hunters keep a tight grip on their pocketbooks. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the latest earnings report from Dollar Tree.
Stock in Dollar Tree is slumping after the discount retailer lowered its sales forecast for the year. Dollar Tree says its cost-conscious customers are getting even more cautious with their spending. A survey of manufacturing managers finds the nation's factory sector is still in a slump, with new orders and output both down in August. Managers blame high borrowing costs along with uncertainty over the upcoming election. Oil prices are falling, with the U.S. benchmark dropping below $70 a barrel. Retail gasoline prices are also down. AAA reports the average price of regular gas nationwide is just under $3.32 a gallon. That's down about a nickel from a week ago and 50 cents lower than this time last year. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
U.S. stocks are mixed this hour. The Nasdaq is down 15 points. The S&P's fallen 3. The Dow Jones Industrial is up 39 points. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. 5 new Democratic lawmakers appear set to join the Massachusetts House of Representatives next January after wins in yesterday's primary. That's in addition to the many incumbent state reps and senators who sailed through the primary. GBH's Katie Lannon has more.
For most voters, the primary election brought little suspense. Only 32 sitting lawmakers in the 200-seat legislature even faced an opponent. In 5 House districts, voters effectively picked a new state rep in the Democratic primary. Greg Schwartz in Newton, Sean Reed in Lynn. Thomas Moakley in Falmouth, Hadley Luddy in Orleans, and Homar Gomez in East Hampton. Each of those candidates won a race for an open seat with no Republican on the ballot this fall. Katie Lannon, GBH News 89.7.
A federal judge in Massachusetts has ruled that a man can sue the repo company that was towing away his BMW last year because the tow truck driver started to lift up the car while the man was inside. Mass Lawyers Weekly reports that David Shue had fallen behind on payments on his 2013 Beamer, and when the tow truck showed up, he objected to its repossession and he got in the car. Judge Allison Burroughs ruled that the court is satisfied that hooking the BMW up to the tow truck and proceeding to lift it up with Shue inside proves a breach of present purposes and is allowing Shue to sue. Judge Burroughs also denied the repo company's motion to dismiss that lawsuit. 76 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I want to mention Senator Elizabeth Warren will be with us tomorrow. Not here, though. It's going to be in Brighton. But we'll be back here on Friday for another hour of Ask the Governor with Maura Healey. She'll take our questions and yours, and she's going to be at the Boston Public Library Friday. And the mayor will be here on Tuesday. Hello again.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Hello again. So I just want to remind you, we have this new feature. It started yesterday, I think it was. It was yesterday, yes. We put a question out, and you text a thought or a question about it. Today's, and we're going to do it for a few minutes before the end of this hour, before the 1 o'clock news, which is also new to us here. We learned recently from Christopher Muther, the travel writer for the Globe, that if you put an upside-down pineapple on your door and your cart at the grocery store, you're basically saying you're open to pretty much anything. And we want to know if you know about it, if you're practicing it. The judge is looking strangely as we talk about this. Apparently she may know something about it too, but that's for another day.
Not.
You can text us at 877-301-8970. We're joined now at the library by Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a former federal judge, senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, and a BPR contributor. Hello, Judge Gertner.
Hello. Hello.
Hey,
I'm very glad you don't know about this, Judge Gertner. I'm very glad you don't.
But can I tell you what she does know about before we even start? Do you mind if I bring this up for a minute? You email out some photographs.
Oh, yeah.
From New Hampshire last week of northern lights.
Yeah.
I know it's impossible to describe a visual that is so... It was unbelievable. Had you ever seen them before?
I had seen them before, but in Iceland. It was actually an amazing story. My son was there to watch the meteor shower, the Pleiades meteor shower.
Yeah.
So that's how you pronounce it. And so they were there at 1 o'clock, lying on the rocks, and all of a sudden the sky over the Gregg Lake, which is a small lake in New Hampshire, turned green with levels of, it's like veils. And he, because he didn't know what he was looking at, literally looked it up. And there on the NASA webpage was an electromagnetic storms on the sun which is what causes northern lights, but it was going to be so strong that it would reach down into southern New England.
So take your breath away?
He didn't wake me up, which I will never forgive him for the rest of his life. I just want to make this clear, because I'm a sort of amateur astronomer, so he didn't wake me up, but it was turned green and turned red. So I sent you the pictures because it really is extraordinary.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
In any case, good to see you.
That concludes my presentation.
Was it unexpected though, or did they know this was coming?
Well, they may have known it was coming, but they didn't widely publicize it.
Yeah.
So he didn't know, when he was sitting there, he didn't know what he was looking at. It sort of says something about how wired we are. They're on this sort of small lake. He literally went online and checked to see whether what he was seeing was what he thought he was seeing.
That is really...
It was cool. It was very cool.
Really neat. Okay, well, to get back to the depressing things going on right here on planet Earth here, well, I guess that happened on planet Earth, in the sky above planet Earth, maybe. We're all waiting for this sentencing hearing on, I think it's still going to be September 18th. This is with Judge Merchant. This is the 34 felony case, the election interference case in Manhattan. What do people think is going to happen?
Well, right now, former President Trump tried for the second time to remove the Bragg case, that's the hush money case, election interference, to remove it to federal court, which would then, claiming that the immunity decision that the Supreme Court rendered in June makes him immune from the New York case. Let's take a pause for a moment. The argument that he should be immune from a case that involved paying a porn star money during the campaign is absurd. So he went into federal court and said you should remove it into federal court. The statute that he was seeking to come under was really a sort of post-Civil War statute when federal officials enforcing federal law, and particularly federal, civil rights laws, were harassed in state courts in the South. And the statute was intended to take prosecutions like that and move them into federal court. The notion that the Stormy Daniels case bears any relationship to that picture is extraordinary. And the federal judge that the case was before, so he tries to remove the Bragg case, the hush money case, into federal court. The federal judge there, Judge Hellerstein, essentially gave him the back of the hand. Denied it. He can try to appeal that, and he can try to appeal the denial of removal to the Supreme Court.
So I have a couple more questions about this thing. Again, the sentencing is tentatively scheduled September 18th. I'm pretty sure that Judge Merchant, a couple of weeks ago when he set the date, said something like, if there's sentencing on that day, because of the immunity. I reread an executive summary of this immunity decision. I know you explained it to us immediately after. It is so unimaginably horrible for this country, not just for now, for this country in the future. But however, the argument that Trump is making is that certain testimony in that trial, including a conversation he had with Hope Hicks, would not have been allowed based on the immunity decision. It's one of those core constitutional power things. And I assume, and there's one other thing that I can't remember, but I assume the argument of his lawyers, which to me is not that preposterous, tell me if it is because the jury got to hear those two things that shouldn't have been permitted based upon what the Supreme Court subsequently said about the immunity of a president. That tainted all the testimony that went to the jury, and as a result, everything's got to be thrown out.
Messages on Twitter, I think they were.
Is that what it was? Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Although what they're saying is that chunk of evidence in the hush money case, the evidence, the testimony of Hope Hicks in the White House, should not have been admitted as a matter of evidence, should be taken out of the pot. And then the question is whether the concept is harmless error, whether there's enough remaining evidence to have convicted him.
Without that.
Yeah. An evidence issue is quintessentially an issue for the state court. In other words, so getting back to the removal issue, that's not something that should be litigated in state court. Merchant should consider whether Hicks's testimony, essentially when you take it out of it should have been admitted, and if it should not have been admitted, what does it affect about the rest of the case? Now, the rest of the case was reasonably strong in my view. So it's likely not to end the prosecution, but that's one of the issues before him.
Okay, so one last question. I know we've asked this a multitude of times, and don't be offended I forget your answer. That's why I'm asking it again.
Appalled.
I knew you'd be appalled.
I'm going to take notes.
So you're a federal, this is a state court. You're a judge, as you were for a lot of years. September 18th is, 7 weeks before a presidential election. Isn't the reasonable thing for a judge to do is to agree to Trump's request that the sentencing be postponed until after November 5th?
I think that's the reasonable thing to do. I think that's right. I think racing to sentence him at this point, this is a discretionary issue. In other words, there's no law here. The judge could go for it, doesn't have to go for it. And there's a point at which sentencings are put off for all sorts of things. My daughter is getting married. I'm having hernia surgery. So he could put it off for this. And it sounds like he will, and it sounds like Bragg is not pushing him to sentence former President Trump before the
The
election.
DA said, we'll defer to you in
You'll
terms
defer
of that
to,
decision.
right. He's not saying no one is above the law. I mean, this is really unique set of circumstances.
Would you have postponed the decision?
Yes.
You would have.
So if he wins, this is a state court, not a federal court, so he can't dismiss it like he could the federal stuff. So if he wins, will Bragg, will a merchant say, well, okay, we'll do it January 17th or something?
Or he could do it, he
Post-November 5th.
Post-November 5th, right.
Post-November 5th, before he even gets into...
He certainly could. That's why Trump...
So that would certainly eliminate any jail kind of thing, obviously.
Yeah, well, there's
in the White House...
Right, community service in the White House.
Community service in the White House.
That's why what Trump is trying to do is to get the Bragg case into federal court.
Right, so he can dismiss that,
So
too.
he can dismiss it and get it up to the Supreme Court. Now, the speculation is that they're going to try to get the removal question of the Bragg case all the way up to the Supreme Court. And I have been horrified at what the court has been doing. If the Supreme Court interferes with the Bragg prosecution, that is such that would be so completely inconsistent with our law. I wouldn't even know where to begin, because state
Sort of like
criminal
repealing Roe v. Wade.
Because criminal prosecutions are quintessentially state.
Yeah.
When a state begins a criminal prosecution, the feds, basically back off.
You know what I wonder? Obviously, he's the president, so as you say, this
Well,
makes
he's not
things-
the president.
Well, he's the former president, and he could be the president again, so there's the uniqueness there. But I'm wondering if, in general, if he were just any old billionaire, it has been incredible to me how Trump has succeeded in delaying. I get it now with the election, that's a different thing because of who he is, presidential or former presidential-wise. But is this typical? If you are some billionaire, are you able to delay so long like he has been able to?
This is an article you and I have to write. No one could. If it was an ordinary defendant, an ordinary person, there's no way that these delays would have been allowed. But what you saw, it's interesting. I think the model. This is completely Gertner on speculation here. It's like the Mueller report. Bob Mueller looked under every rock and did not ultimately, if you recall, come to a conclusion, because he wanted to leave that for Barr, and he was sort of giving Trump the benefit of every doubt and leaving it up to Barr to make the final decision. What Mueller didn't account for was he hit a buzzsaw.
Yeah.
Barr was not... If he had any wiggle room, he was certainly not going to proceed with any finding against Trump. Putting aside whether there's a criminal prosecution, the issue was only a finding against Trump. I think that that's what's happened now. I think that every judge, with the exception of Cannon,
in Florida,
has given Trump the benefit of the doubt that is not given to anyone other. Is not given to the same degree to anyone. To challenge, to insist on rights. On the one hand, it's wonderful to insist on rights, but certainly not to the degree that courts have indulged Trump.
Okay.
And then again, Trump's prosecutions now have hit a buzzsaw. The buzzsaw is not Barr. That was in the Mueller report. The buzzsaw is the Supreme Court. The buzzsaw is the Supreme Court, which no one expected. I've been on this program. I never expected the immunity decision.
Yeah.
So having delayed, the Supreme Court then delayed the immunity decision, issued this extraordinary decision, and at that point, all the earlier delays are paying off for Trump.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. It's because he's the former president and possibly next president, not because any billionaire could go in and spend $50 million on lawyers and get this sort of endless back and forth.
No one else could. No one else could.
We're talking to former federal judge Nancy Garrett. Before we get to the January 6th case and what's going to happen there, including, I assume they're going to make the same argument in front of Judge Shutkin they made in front of Cannon, that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, was improperly appointed, so throughout the whole case. Before we get to this may be out there, but bear with me for a second. Here is Donald Trump on the Lex Friedman, whoever that is, podcast, admitting he lost the 2020 election. Here's this sound.
I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that, and lost by a whisker. And look what happened to the world.
So I lost by a whisker. Almost all of those dozens of cases, every one of which he lost except for one small one on a technicality, was predicated on the notion that he hadn't lost at all. Can prosecutors go back to those courts and say the plaintiff, the person who appealed this decision, appealed premised on the notion that the election was stolen when he's now admitted that he lost the election?
When was this?
What was the date of this, Jamie? We're going to check in a second. While we're getting the date.
But I mean, he lost all those cases. He's now admitted to it. Why did anyone want to go back to those decisions? He's already
maybe
lost
find
them.
him in contempt. I mean, if someone brings a case in front of you in your former life and it was frivolous, well, I would argue if he's saying the election was stolen in so-and-so and he's admitting here, is that ridiculous?
Well, I don't know whether they could go back with respect to him unless he as a witness filed affidavits or gave testimony in those cases.
It was yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, if he didn't,
okay.
It may be a lawyer issue. If the lawyers knew that these were bogus, you can go against the lawyers, as with Eastman and Giuliani and Powell, Trump's lawyers.
So the January 6th case in front of Judge Chutkan, obviously having to deal with immunity issues. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, re-indicted Trump, narrowing with the same 4 core charges, but narrowing the set of facts to support them in an attempt to comply with the immunity decision about Supreme Court. I guess 2 questions. One, did he succeed in your estimation? Did he narrow it well enough for it to stay alive? And secondly, how about that issue I raised a minute ago that they'll raise, like they succeeded with Judge Cannon in Florida, that the whole case has got to be dismissed because Jack Smith was improperly chosen?
Well, let me start with that. I cannot imagine at all, but a lot of things have happened here that I couldn't imagine. I don't believe that Judge Chutkan will dignify the special counsel argument, nor the D.C. Circuit, because the overwhelming evidence, I mean, Cannon's decision is literally the only one, disqualifying the special counsel, ever.
Okay.
So there are arguments people have made, but they've never succeeded. So I don't think that that's
Forget
an issue.
that. Okay.
What Smith did, which was interesting, he took out the discussions with the Department of Justice, which is really unfortunate because this was telling the Department of Justice to lie about the election, issue statements to lie about the election. But they took that out because it was arguably core function of the president to deal with his Department of Justice.
Can we stay on that for 1 second, just so people understand the immunity decision? If Donald Trump's discussion with the Justice Department, we don't know what the exact words were listen, I'm working hard to steal the election, so you got to help me figure out how to do this. That is a core constitutional power that is protected according to the Supreme Court, and he can't be prosecuted.
Well,
even if he admitted, my goal is to steal an election that I lost.
What about SEAL Team 6? That was the question that the lawyers were asked.
Well, the SEAL Team 6 would be that.
So you could say you're calling your Attorney General to plot against your political enemies and setting out SEAL Team 6. He'd be immune.
Right, but that was an extreme example. Okay, but I mean, the argument that Jim is suggesting, which could well happen, is he calls up his Attorney General and says, find something to prosecute, Joe Biden for. Find something. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's true. And with that, and then if he has, in fact, with Project 2025, which is this model for what he wants to do, if he has, in fact, replaced civil servants in the DOJ with his lackeys, then they'll go, yes, sir. Whereas ordinarily there would be actually, sir, you can't do that. Actually, sir, there's nothing. So, but again, that all would be immune. Okay,
so I interrupted you to explain that. How good a job did Jack Smith do in your estimation?
I mean, again, who knows, but I think he did. He took out the Department of Justice stuff. He left in the Pence stuff, but he recharacterized Pence. When Trump was talking to Pence, he was not talking to Pence in his capacity as vice president. He was talking to Pence in Pence's capacity as a ceremonial head of the Congress, whose only purpose was to certify the votes. And Trump was not acting as president. Here's what you should do, because it wasn't official at all. He was acting as a candidate.
Yeah.
And so he essentially recharacterized that so that it would fit within the Supreme Court's decision. The rest of it, the false electors, or the president, he added some language that suggested again that Trump was not really concerned about election integrity, apropos of this decision, of these comments yesterday. Trump was concerned with his role as candidate, and that is not an official function. Who knows, however, since no one expected the Supreme Court's immunity decision,
what they do.
Who knows what they do? But again, at this point, all they have to do is delay. So it comes up, let's say Chutkan says this indictment is appropriate, Court of Appeal says this indictment is appropriate, meets the Supreme Court's standards, gets up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, oh no, we have to think about this. And they think about it after November 5th.
You know, this is not on our agenda, but you mentioned attorneys general for a second. Before we get to Ketanji Brown Jackson and her position on NPR about and elsewhere about ethics, the word on the street, I know you know this, that is if Hillary Clinton had been elected president, you would have been the Attorney General of the United States. There is a governor in Massachusetts who's going to be with us on Friday who apparently, I don't know if she's on a short list, but is being discussed a lot in punditry circles as a possible Attorney General. Based upon what you know of her and her work as Attorney General, what's your sense about her as the Attorney General of the United States?
Well, I think that she would be a good choice. I'm not sure she'd want that because she has an electoral base. You know, Garland will have been a model not to follow. Mm-hmm. It goes back to your questions, which is people, every part of the government were bending over backwards to, not to protect Trump necessarily, but to give him the benefit of every doubt. And so it's reported that the first year after the election, Garland said, "Don't touch, don't touch Trump," and we're going to build up from the January 6th defendants. You know, the way you might for a drug cartel, you start with the guy on the street and then he tells them more about the guy. Yeah. But that was, of course, ridiculous because you knew what the guy at the top was saying. You didn't have to go up through the ranks. So he waited, and that delay is the reason things are where they are.
Well, you know, when you think about it, I mean, just to me, and neither a lawyer nor a judge, to me, Garland and Mueller were two people that were operating like it's the 1950s.
Right.
You know, they just didn't get it. And somebody was saying Mueller didn't find it. Yes, he did. He found all those obstruction of justice. Yeah. I think there were 10 or 12 counts.
But he didn't draw the
say
conclusion.
That.
Right.
Yeah. But when you read the Mueller report, they were right there. So he did find all these things, but they were just the wrong men for the wrong season.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's what I was saying about the buzzsaw. I mean, Andrew Weissman, who's on MSNBC,
yeah, he's good.
Talks about this a lot. And you know, they were following the rules, and then they hit someone who doesn't follow the rules. Same thing here. All of the judges and everyone is following the rules quite scrupulously. And then you hit a Supreme Court, candidly, that is not following the rules. Yeah. And I say that even if you disagree, even if you agree with what they ultimately did, we've talked about this before, and I just want to say it again. Judging is about dealing with the case in front of you, not about tomorrow's case, and not about what might happen 10 years from now. When Justice Gorsuch said, we are writing an opinion for the ages.
Yes.
He was acting, in my view, not as a judge deciding the case in front of him, but as a legislator. And the irony is that decision, that incredibly complicated decision, is what a legislator might do. And I might add, looks an awful like Roe v. Wade. And one criticism of Roe v. Wade is that they were acting like a legislator, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, and not dealing with the specific issues in front of them. That's what this court did.
By the way, there's an update on the what happened at this high school in Winder, Georgia. The sheriff's office is saying casualties have been reported. However, details on the number of their conditions is not available at this time.
And they have custody. They have the shooter in custody.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. So we've talked to you about the lack of ethical standards at Supreme Court, and we all know Clarence Thomas. We all know all these stories, and now there's this unenforceable thing. And Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Brown Jackson, has a book out, and she was interviewed on NPR, CBS Morning News, or some such thing. Maybe it wasn't the Morning News. CBS with Norah O'Donnell, talking about an enforceable code of ethics for she and her colleagues, any Supreme Court judges here.
Binding code of ethics is pretty standard for judges. And so I guess the question is the Supreme Court any different? And I guess I have not seen a persuasive reason as to why the court is different than the other courts.
Are you considering supporting an enforcement mechanism?
I am considering supporting it as a general matter. I'm not going to get into commenting on particular policy proposals, but from my perspective, I don't have any problem with an enforceable code.
I know we've gone through this 1,000 times with you. I don't understand. I don't have a problem with an enforceable code. Why is it not okay to say, of course, there has to be an enforceable code, or it is totally meaningless? She doesn't have to trash Clarence Thomas or Samuel Alito. There must be an enforceable. I don't understand this.
Well, you know, sometimes after 17 years on the bench, I began to think there was such a thing as judge speak. And this was judge speak. This was not, whoa, of course we need I can talk like that now. It's so exciting. I can talk like that now. But judge speak is, you know, that was the functional equivalent of we should have an enforceable code of ethics, because any other kind of code of ethics that relies on the goodwill of the Supreme Court justices. I mean, it's interesting. We didn't need an enforceable code of ethics until now with this court. And, I mean, think of it this way. I mean, you said we don't need drug laws. Everybody will know not to overdose. And then you get an overdose, and then you say, you know what, maybe we do. Well, the overdoses are Alito and Thomas, and maybe we do. And she should have been more clear, but she wasn't.
By the way, I should just say, this judge speak thing, with all due respect to you, is total BS. And I'll tell you, you, of all people, to be talking about that, aren't you the woman who testified as the only federal judge in front of Congress about cameras in the courtroom?
Yes.
So that wasn't judge speak.
Right.
And that obviously upset your colleagues.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so why can't she, I'm serious, why can't she take a lead, not just she, any of the three people of principle on the Supreme Court, maybe 3.5, depending on the issue. Why can't she just take a lead on this damn thing?
I think that she has, by what she said. I think that actually was the functional equivalent. She didn't have to scream it. I think that was the functional equivalent.
Well, she also said something that kind of bothered me. I mean, I guess she said this before, the Supreme Court has no army, but she's quoted in this piece as saying the court doesn't have any mechanism of enforcement of its opinions. And I guess that's technically true, but look at what's happened already with affirmative action. We were just talking about this the other day, how Amherst College, Tufts, MIT have seen this dramatic decline of black kids applying to their schools. So people pay attention, needless to say, to what the Supreme Court says.
Well, well, that's right. But I think her point was that if the Supreme Court loses popular support and loses legitimacy, people won't pay attention.
Well, it's lost legitimacy.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
It's a pleasure to see you.
Good to see you.
Former Judge Nancy Gertner.
Thank you very much, Judge Gertner. We have been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor, and we're extremely grateful for that. Up next, Worcester-based Love Your Labels is hosting their annual Queer AF Fashion and Art Show. We're going to taste what that's all about. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public Radio.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Tobin Bridge construction is affecting residents in Charlestown and Chelsea, some of whom say the state isn't doing a good job communicating its mitigation efforts. We'll have the latest on the tight race between Cambridge State Senator Marjorie Decker and her challenger, Evan McKay. And I'll talk with a local scientist who's studying the behavior of fire in zero-G with the help of NASA astronauts on the International Space Station. That's coming up at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And the MBTA Commuter Rail, providing public transportation service to over 170 cities and towns in Massachusetts. Just take the train. You can plan your trip at mbta.com/massbytrain.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browder. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Answer your questions. And Tuesday, back here at the library, Mayor Wu joins us to do the exact same thing. This, we said how good Jared looked a minute ago. He ain't got nothing on these guests, let me tell you. This Friday, the Worcester-based nonprofit Love Your Labels will host their 5th annual Queer AF, an art and fashion experience. The self-described Queer Met Gala of Massachusetts offers local artists and designers the opportunity to show their vision, giving voice to a queer youth and emerging artists in New England's second largest city, all in the name of a wonderful cause, of course, Love Your Labels offering. Well, let them say what Love Your Labels does in a minute. Here is with us at the interview desk is a familiar face, Love Your Labels co-founder Joshua Croak. Josh, it's great to see you again.
Great to be here.
And a new face, Lee Strauss, drag star Deshador Famous is in the building. Deshador, it's great to have you. Tickets for Queer AF are on sale now. For information, the website to visit is loveyourlabels.org. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Hi.
Joshua, great to see you again. So tell us elaborate on what Jim said. Tell us more about Queer AF. What is it?
Yeah, so Queer AF is our annual fashion show fundraising event that we hold at Mechanics Hall in Worcester. It's a fundraiser for Love Your Labels youth fashion design programs and other programs that we host like Drag Storytime in Worcester, supporting queer and trans youth in Central Mass and beyond.
And that's Love Your Labels. That's the mission, essentially, of explain what Love Your Labels is.
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit founded and based in Worcester that supports queer and trans youth through art, fashion, and design programs and works to create inclusive and loving space everywhere with families. And so our kind of flagship program is called Threads, which is a youth fashion design program where we use fashion as a way to talk to young people about gender expression, identity, and really create a supportive environment as they're evolving into their amazing selves.
Did you design that?
No, I am actually wearing Rufus Dixon, who is one of our fashion design educators, a LaSalle University alum,
great.
and is one of our featured designers in this year's show as well as last year.
Fabulous.
Okay, so Deshador, tell us what your deal is. What's your involvement here?
So I am a local queen in Worcester. I'm a resident of Worcester, born and raised in Worcester. I've been doing drag for about 15 years now. I got involved with Queer AF last year. Somebody took a little dig and said that I wasn't doing enough for my community, so I said, we're stepping up. We're going to do something. And
she
so
has
got
stepped
involved,
up.
and I love every minute that I get to spend with Love Your Labels and Queer AF and just all the programs involved.
Okay, so as a Worcester native, why Worcester? Why Worcester get this special treat up there?
Worcester's my home.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being a little art kid with a little scholarship at the Worcester Art Museum at 6 years old, making sculptures and stuff like that. So I've always been a creative. I think it's super important what we're doing here, just bringing these programs to these kids and just showing them that they're free to express themselves and just be who they're going to be and be fierce, and that's it.
Josh, June was Pride Month, but in Worcester, it's the first half of September. Do I have that right? Or
You're right, yes.
What's up with that?
I don't know what the formal line is. I think it's lost to history. But I say that Worcester, folks say it's the last Pride stop in New England, but we also have the college students back in the city, which brings an additional like 40,000 plus folks.
We're a college town, so.
And it's so different. I was asking you about Worcester because Worcester to me used to be kind of struggling. You think of Worcester as like Springfield, Lawrence, my hometown, Fall River. Not anymore. I mean, something's
big
happened
turnaround.
up there. Yeah. I mean,
and I can attest to that too. I grew up in Worcester, like I said. I grew up in low income neighborhoods and all of that. So I've seen the bad in Worcester. I've seen gang violence and stuff like that. So to see Worcester like really turn around and give back to its city, and there's so much art flowing throughout the whole city. There's so many programs. There's so many things happening. So many things to do for people. Like a lot of people that don't know about Worcester, I'm like, come and find out.
What happened though? What was the turnaround about?
Us queer people.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. There you
yeah,
go.
like we're here with our trumpets ready to go.
but Josh,
I just feel like the city's really invested in itself.
You're saying that half in jest, but Worcester has become like an LGBTQ plus center. I mean, this is not like a one and done kind of deal. It has become the centerpiece of a lot of the good things that that are happening on that front. So why?
It's been amazing to see. I think, honestly, just the advocacy of organizers and people. I've been in Worcester for over 13 years. I'm a WPI alum. I came to the city, but I grew up in central Massachusetts, small town. And Worcester was always the pass-through city to Boston when I was growing up. And then I came here, went to WPI, and decided to get involved in the community. And there was so much, as Deja was saying, art, culture, and queerness that was there. And we didn't have as many physical spaces as we do now to organize and to gather, but with places like FemBar, which is one of 30 lesbian bars.
In the country, right?
In the country. Yeah. In the country.
Yeah, we talked about that before. There used to be so many lesbian
200
bars.
of them.
Yeah, so how come? How come there's so few lesbian bars left? Do you have any
So it's interesting.
insight?
There's actually a study around how there has been a closure of queer-owned spaces or queer spaces that are specifically like a lesbian bar or gay bar. But there's been a rise in queer pop-up events and things. So we've seen, like, you can ask Deja. Deja's schedule is busy. She is working. And every night in Worcester, I used to be able to go to every single queer event in Worcester, and I can't feasibly do it anymore because there's so much going on.
It's a lot.
So what's going to go on? We all see the pictures of the Met Gala at the Met, and everybody's got these wild outfits. It's so much fun to look at the pictures. So what are people going to see?
Everything.
Yeah.
Fashion, art, creativity, local queens. Queens from Boston are going to come down and, put on performances for us. We have RuPaul's Drag Race girls. We have designers from Project Runway, who I remember watching growing up.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just like a big pot of creativity exploding all in one room.
Who did what you're wearing?
A little bit of everything. I customized this jacket. She's been with me for a long time, representing all of my pins and trans, representation and all of that. So just a little this, a little that,
So Josh, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, Josh, you can answer this. I read in one of these information about what's going on up there in Worcester, that there's an inclusive runway. So people can kind of get up and pretend that they're modeling, and you can just march up and down if you're into it.
One of my favorite things that has evolved in Queer AF, we started Queer AF back in 2019, and it was like, let's throw a fashion show as a fundraiser for this new nonprofit, Love Your Labels, that we're starting. And we were like, oh, we've never run a fashion show before. We need models. And so we went into our community, and we also said, the media still doesn't represent queer and trans folks and inclusive bodies in ways that we want to see, so that young people can look at themselves in the future. And so we've built this community runway where models are from the community. And we also, for anyone who buys a ticket and attends, also there's an audience walk. So folks can strut their stuff on the runway. And it's a really empowering experience, I have to say.
Oh, yeah. Where's the runway go? Is it coming into the audience?
Right into the audience.
Oh, right into
right
the
in
audience.
through
Okay.
What, are you about to do this while you're so...
Well, I think...
Come
a lot of
through,
people
Marjorie.
think about,
Show us your walk.
Yeah, well, I'm not really...
I'd like to see your walk, too, while we're on it.
But
Go ahead.
you do see these things all the time. And I think a lot of people think of that. What would it be like to walk down, to strut my stuff down a runway with a big crowd there? I think it's kind of an enticement.
And we've had people share stories about the impact of that, like whether it's been on their coming out journey, and that was a really powerful opportunity for them to feel seen and embraced by community, because you are walking and you are getting cheered on, and everyone knows that that environment is there to support you and affirm you 100%.
And I think you also said we're talking about different body types too, so you don't have to be 75 pounds and anorexic and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. We are body diverse, we are age diverse, we are disability centered, we are rooted with queer and trans folks in our community, but the beautiful intersection of identity that we hold as queer and trans folks is really uplifted and celebrated.
We're talking to Joshua Croak, that was the voice you just heard, co-founder of Love Your Labels, which is the beneficiary of what they raised Friday night. Raised Friday, right?
Friday night.
At Queer AF, and again, you can visit the website loveyourlabels.org to find out. And also here is drag star Deja Famous. You're really positive about the work you're doing, as you should be, but there's almost not a day that goes by that there's not some horrible story about the right in this country deciding the most convenient target for them in an attempt to get votes and support, with cruelty being the thing, is particularly the trans population. Are we really that different here? I mean, in the drag world, we've seen a lot of attacks on drag queens just doing story hour and that sort of thing. How much in JP? How much healthier are we in this part of the world?
You know, I will say the Trevor Project, which is a great organization, has research that found that over 90% of queer and trans kids says that their mental health has been affected by the drag bans, the book bans, the anti-LGBT censorship that's happening across the country. In 2023, there was a 90% increase in books that were targeted for bans at libraries, at schools. A large majority of those are because of LGBT content and authors. And so we actually have a theme for this year's show. While it is rooted in joy and celebration for community, we are with the band this year. And so
I'm with the band.
We are a punk
B-A-N-N-E-D for those who don't know.
Yes. And we are bringing attention to this because we want to encourage, we're going to have a voter booth. So anyone who attends who isn't registered to vote can get registered at Queer AF on Friday. Because this is an incredibly important year, but every year is important. And we're not immune here in Massachusetts. You know, we see hate crimes and bullying increasing in schools.
Daisha, as a drag star, what have you seen and what have friends seen?
I mean, I have countless stories. I've seen attacks. I've seen, indirect attacks. I've seen all of it. It's unfortunate that it continues to be a target. Our people are getting targeted every day. I see it walking down the street with a simple look, and somebody's just trying to live their life.
Yeah.
I can go into details, but we don't have the time for that. But it's just sad to see that, people just can't be people without, and that's what we want. We just want people to be people. Live freely, be yourselves, love freely, right? And as long as you're being a kind human being, that's what counts. I believe that anyway.
Well, let me ask a naive question about this if I can. I mean, putting aside, which is very hard to do, the Ron DeSantis's of the world, and there are a lot of them who basically prey on this issue and use it and don't give a damn about what pain they cause in people's lives. I remember maybe 15, 20 years ago, we had Sue O'Connell on our old show, and we were talking about how only 28% of America supported same-sex marriage. And the only people who majorities were, I remember this like it was yesterday, young people, of course, and somebody who said they knew a gay person, which is, talk about change in the world, and that number is close to 70% now. My hopeful feeling, and I hope this is not naive, and I want to get your thoughts about this, starting with you, Josh, is once people get to know a trans person, because there is somebody, it's somebody's kid, you're living on the block. Do you think that kind of evolution of acceptance and tolerance and maybe even love is in the offing, and it's just we're going through a horribly painful time till we get there?
I think people have felt emboldened because of the national dialogue to be more vocal about their hate and lack of awareness and ignorance. And I do believe, when you know a trans person in your life, especially a young person who is, and this is what I tell to families and folks, I was like, I can't change your religion, I can't change your culture, I'm not here to change your belief system necessarily. What I can tell you is we know that young people who don't have affirming adults in their lives are more likely to be substance dependent, attempt suicide, and just one single affirming adult in the life of a queer or trans young person reduces their likelihood of attempting suicide by over 40%.
So is that part of the work you do with Love Your Labels, is try to find those? I mean, explain. You described superficially, I don't mean that critically, we only asked you a quick question. What's on the ground work that this money goes to that you raise Friday night?
Absolutely. So outside of our Threads program, we are in community doing advocacy work. We marched last year against Bishop McManus's anti-LGBT policies that were enacted across the Catholic Diocese in Worcester. So when there are queer or trans people in need, we are an organization that's proud to say that folks come to us for support. And that can be as simple as sitting down with a young person and saying, you matter, I love you, you are affirmed in who you are. Thank you for sharing part of yourself with me in a way that allows us to deepen our relationship.
So, Daisha, it's about damn time you got more involved in your community. Wouldn't you agree?
It's about damn time. I think I'm doing okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, Joshua, tell us about the podcast.
Yes. So Queer for Cities is a podcast about the intersection of identity, place, really looking at how space is constructed and designed and how queer folks have been and continue to be in community, but really looks at exploring the folks that are doing this work, whether you're an urbanist, an architect, an artist.
A drag queen.
A drag queen. Deja most recently featured on our most recent episode talking about the Queer AF show, but really about like cultivating community. And like that's the space that I work in, is community design, and really thinking intentionally about how do we make the streets safe, accessible, and joyful for people with queerness at the center, because we need to focus on queer justice, racial justice, disability justice, and the way we build our environments is such a critical part in that.
So
and the podcast is called Queer for Cities.
Yes.
Queer for Cities.
Deshore, let's end where we began. Give people, if they just tuned in, Friday night, Queer AF, you find out information at loveyourlabels.org, but before they go there, what's happening?
The city's ready to gear up for Queer AF.
And what are people going to experience if they're there?
You'll see me perform. I'll be performing with my drag mother and drag sister, Lady Sabrina and Boots. You'll see Jackie Cox and Jan Sport hosting and performing. You'll see lines from Mondo and Sam, Donovan from Project Runway. Some other local entertainers are going to be there as well.
And some of our kids. I'm really excited. Some of our youth.
Our Threads kids are going to be featured in the show as well. So they're going to be showing some of their work that they've been working really hard on, that we've had the pleasure of working with them closely and, mentoring them and just kind of giving them the okay to just be creative and throw it all out there.
Sounds like a great event for a really important cause. You're doing great work, and it's great to see you both. See you again, Josh.
Yeah,
and it's great to meet
see
you
again.
It's going to be a party.
Yeah, for coming
It's going to be very demure. Very mindful.
I doubt that, the demure part. Mechanics Hall, is that where this deal is?
Yes.
Friday night, September 6th, Mechanics
right.
Hall. Okay.
Yeah.
Friday night, September
Great to see you
6th,
both.
Worcester's Mechanic Hall. For more information and to book tickets, the website is loveyourlabels.org. That's loveyourlabels.org. Thank you to Joshua Croak and Deja famous for coming in.
Thank you, Marjorie.
From
Thank you.
Love Your Labels,
Our pleasure.
fifth annual Queer AF Art and Fashion Show, this Friday, September 6th, Worcester's Mechanic Hall. After a quick break, we have been asking you to text in if an upside-down pineapple in your shopping cart is really the best way to get a date in the grocery aisle. Your responses did not disappoint. We're going to read as many as we can before the 1 o'clock news. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library.
The history of busing in Boston is often framed as a black and white affair, but it wasn't just that.
I wish that they could have done a lot better educating the kids from China.
This is the busing story that played out from Chinatown to the North End.
5 school committee members, all white, sat up there like they were God.
Where Chinese parents had to fight for their voices to be heard.
By the time the Chinese parent went up to read their letter, 3 of them got up and left.
I'm Philip Martin, Boston Busing at 50, tomorrow on GBH's Morning Edition.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.org. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Gloucester Stage, presenting The Hombres with Teatro Chelsea. Macho construction workers get sucked in by the yoga studio next to their job site in this premiere comedy. Starts September 6th. GloucesterStage.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Senator Warren joins us tomorrow in Brighton. It's our news segment. We spend a few minutes every day dealing with some texts that you have sent in on a topic that we considered worth talking about. Dating apps seem to be universally hated, and the pineapple, apparently the upside-down pineapple, is a sign, as we learned from the travel writer of the Globe, Christopher Muther, that you were open, let's say.
Upside down pineapple is a symbol on a door of a cruise ship as you are very welcome to enter. Very welcome.
Very welcome. Throughout the show, you've been texting your thoughts at 877-301-8970 about this method of, I guess, getting together with people because it's a huge trend in Spain and elsewhere where singles are putting pineapples in their shopping carts upside down to signal that they're single and, let's put it this way, ready for love. Have you engaged in this? Why the pineapple? Did you even know about this? Margie, did you know about this before Christopher?
I did not.
What do you think of that whole notion?
I think, whatever gets you going, get yourself a date. People are tired of these dating apps. I mean, Michael Walpole is distressed, though, because he only buys canned pineapples, and he wants to know if this applies to upside-down canned pineapples. If so, says Michael, I have to be more attentive with my shopping cart in the future. And Sheila Norton says, a few months ago, while out with friends, one told us about the upside-down pineapple, which I had never heard of. About a week later, I went with this friend to visit her mom in assisted living. Guess what was on her shelf outside her room? A small ceramic pineapple, not yet upside down, but very suspicious.
That's beautiful. By the way, Judy and Danvers text, I do most of my shopping at Market Basket. I have never seen anyone I'd consider dating. Well, that's a problem, too. Now, Marjorie is a very practical woman. We're having this discussion this morning. This is typical Marjorie, by the way, with Jamie and Nicole and whoever else was around. And Marjorie's saying, it's very difficult to have a pineapple upside down in your cart without it falling over. And she said, why not a cantaloupe? And now, Marjorie, you've had a couple of hours to think about this. Yeah. Why not a cantaloupe?
You can't be upside down.
Exactly.
If you're a cantaloupe.
Unless you put a little note saying top and bottom on the cantaloupe.
But
that
did
is
you read
correct.
what Susie in Somerville said?
No, I did not.
Susie in Somerville said, I was at the Market Basket near Union Square last week and saw Jim Browdy with a cart full of pineapples, something you're trying to tell us,
Well,
Jim.
I do. That happens to be the Market Basket that I go to. By the way, this is a little sound. We mentioned that it's a trend in Spain, and here's this TikTok person, Caitlin and Remy, well, two people, this account, Caitlin and Remy abroad. Here's what they had to say.
I keep seeing all over my For You page the Mercadona trend that if you go to Mercadona between 7 to 8 p.m. and you put a pineapple upside down, then you're looking to meet somebody. Back in the States, my cousin told me that a certain grocery store back in Houston, if you did that, it meant you were a swinger. Can you do it for friends? That's weird.
We haven't learned, and I assume we will. Maybe it was. How do you respond if you see an upside down pineapple, wherever it is, in the door of a room on a cruise ship or at Market Basket or wherever it is, and there's an upside down pineapple? Do you respond in kind? How do you connect with that person to say that I am open to you being open? What do you do?
I think if you see someone with a pineapple upside down,
yes,
you might just approach them and just say hello, because apparently they're sending out a message to you. Now, in the United States, the pineapple maneuver is reportedly completed by going into the wine section of the store, and you have more luck.
What do you stick a bottle in your pants or something?
No,
what do you do in the wine
section? You take your shopping cart into the wine section, which is where a lot of the action happens.
It does.
And they also say in this store, one man was dressed as a giant pineapple as part of his bachelor party celebrations. That seems
that guy's
weird.
really ready for action, if you know what I mean.
And I guess where was this, in Spain, where they had to call?
Spain.
They had to call the cops during the 7 to 8 p.m. time slot because of apparently rowdy scenes at the store with the people.
They call
with
it
the
Pineapple Gate there. Do you know that?
Pineapples, yeah. But I think people get tired of these dating apps, and they think, I've not had any luck with the dating apps, and why not try something different? This is another one, Andy in Boston, who says, forget the pineapple. I did it all. Dating apps, a private coach. I even wrote to my rabbi, who would probably know when someone would become available due to their untimely death of a spouse. But in the end, after 4 grueling years of online dating, Andy in Boston met a wonderful man. So there you go.
It's beautiful. That's Pineapple Gate for you.
Yeah, I think that's Jim, there's a crucial question, though.
What is it?
Is there an app to tell if the pineapple is ripe?
Well, we can talk about that another day. Marjorie is the queen of the Detect the Ripe Pineapple, and she'll describe it to you again someday
what's coming
soon.
up next? I think it's...
It would be John King from CNN.
John King is coming up
Thank
next.
you very much.
I wasn't sure. John King from CNN is coming up next. I was rattled by the pineapple stories.
I'm sure you were.
He's next. He's going to zoom in at the library. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming it.
Best-selling author J. Courtney Sullivan. Bring your questions and join us on Monday, September 16th. Learn more at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you
and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the Commonwealth's flagship public university. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu. And Heal Veterinary Clinic in Watertown, committed to providing their clients with conversation-focused visits and caring for pets with low-stress animal handling techniques. Heal Vet, a better experience for you and your pet. Heal.vet.
I'm Kirk Carapezzo with GBH's Higher Ed Desk, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WG.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Injuries are reported from a shooting this morning at Appalachia High School in Georgia. The Barrow County Sheriff's Office said in a statement that one suspect is in custody. The White House says President Biden's been briefed. Federal, state, and local law enforcement officers are on the scene. The school was struck barely more than a month into the new academic year. Vice President Kamala Harris is proposing a $50,000 tax benefit for new small businesses. NPR's Asma Khalid reports Harris intends to lay out her plans during a campaign stop in New Hampshire today.
Harris's plan would allow new small businesses to deduct up to $50,000 for startup expenses. It's a substantial acceleration from the current amount of $5,000. The aim is to help offset the initial cost and create our news.
Former President Donald Trump returns to Pennsylvania today. He's taking part in a town hall-style event in Harrisburg to be moderated by Fox News host Sean Hannity. The Trump campaign's returned multiple times to Pennsylvania, a crucial swing state for the candidates. Several members of Ukraine's government have submitted their resignations in the biggest shakeup since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv. The reshuffle comes as Russia carries out a second wave of deadly missile and drone strikes.
Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba is the most prominent cabinet minister offering to resign. Others set to depart include the Deputy Prime Minister for European Integration, as well as the Ministers of Justice, Environmental Protection, and Military Industries. Parliament must approve these resignations. New appointments are expected on Thursday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's changing personnel to strengthen his country's wartime position. Meanwhile, Russia launched more strikes across Ukraine, killing at least 7 in the western city of Lviv. On Tuesday, missiles killed more than 50 at a military academy in central eastern Ukraine. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
On Wall Street, the Dow is down 37 points at 40,900. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Primary night in Massachusetts brought mostly good news for Beacon Hill lawmakers. As GBH's Katie Lannon reports, most state reps and senators sailed through with little competition.
Only about 1 in 6 state legislators even faced a primary challenge. Of those who did, several were able to declare victory a few hours after polls closed. Some of the House's most outspoken lawmakers at both ends of the political spectrum held on to their seats. Somerville Democrat Erica Eiderhoven and Auburn Republican Paul Frost each fended off challengers. The GOP will now look to make a dent in the legislature's Democratic supermajority in November's election. Katie Lannon, GBH News, 89.7.
Meanwhile, one of the more closely watched primary battles yesterday was a rematch between incumbent Marilyn Devaney and public defender Mara Dolan. Dolan narrowly lost during their first go-round, but she won this time around. The Associated Press declared Dolan the winner around 1:30 this morning. The primary win clears the way for a major change on the Governor's Council that vets and confirms judicial nominees. Shortly after Dolan was declared the winner, she tweeted out a big thanks to everyone who worked on her campaign and then added, quote, "I am incredibly proud to be your Democratic nominee," unquote. Sports, Red Sox wrap up their series with the Mets tonight in New York. Sunny near 80 today, clear and upper 50s overnight, mid-70s tomorrow. We're at 76 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Welcome back to hour number 3. Well, not back to hour number 3. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. Tomorrow in Brighton, Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us. Friday at the library, the governor joins us for an hour of question answering, questions from you and us, 1 to 2. Monday, the GM of the tea, Philip Eng, joins us in Brighton for an hour to answer your questions about the tea. And Tuesday, next Tuesday, back at the library, Mayor Wu is with us from 11 to 12. I think that covers it. By the way, CNN is reporting in that horrible school shooting in Georgia, 2 are dead. At least 2 are dead in that county. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. He's behind 2 great reporting projects this election cycle, all over the map in the battleground. Hello, John King.
I've got my little kitchen cup here. Can you bring me back for the penny conversation?
Yeah.
Do you think we should ban pennies? That's what we're going to ask the listeners.
I'm old enough to remember when it used to have to be, you could buy penny candy up at Schwarm's on Dorchester Avenue.
That's right.
Those days are long gone. Yes, of course we should. Of course we should ban the penny. I saw people throwing them off the ferry boat the other day. I was like, no.
Yeah, and to think that making 1 penny costs you 3 pennies seems a little crazy. Keep doing it.
Seems a lot crazy, actually.
Yeah, it seems a lot crazy, but there's so many other things that seem crazy. Why should that be any different? So what's going on? It's only, was it 9 weeks? A little less than 9 weeks now.
Yep.
To this election, harrowing 9 weeks ahead. What's the latest?
Harrowing is a great word. Tense. Strap in. Strap in. We have some new polling out today from 6 of the battleground states, all won by Joe Biden last time. So the blue wall states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona, and Nevada. And it is as close as you can get. Trump is up 5 in Arizona, so just outside the margin of error. Harris is up 5 in Michigan, just outside the margin of error. Harris is up 6 in Wisconsin, just outside the margin of error. But Georgia and Nevada and Pennsylvania are essentially tied. And those 5, that lead of +5, just outside the margin of error. So yes, they're ahead, but not by a lot. So what do we got? We got, 9 weeks from last night, we count votes. And we have the same 6 battleground states we're always pulling our hair about. I'd probably throw North Carolina into that mix. I haven't seen a poll there in a little bit. And here we go. And if you look at it, it's really fascinating. Trump's biggest advantage right now is that he has the advantage, a big advantage in some of the battleground states when it comes to which candidate do you think would best handle the economy. That is why the vice president's giving an economic speech in New Hampshire. That is why if you look at the TV ads, the vice president's TV ads at the moment are lopsided in favor of ads talking about the economy. That is her biggest weakness, is who would be best to handle the economy. She also, in our polling, has some trouble in what I'll call the middle of the economy among people who identify in these battleground states as either independents or moderate voters. They're the ones who abandoned Trump in 2020. They tend to be suburban voters. They didn't like being suggested maybe we should ingest bleach. They didn't like 5 a.m. tweets. And so especially in the states that have the more Republican DNA, Georgia and Arizona, Harris is having a problem among, in Massachusetts, a moderate tends to be a Democrat. In Georgia or Arizona, a moderate probably leans Republican. And she's having a little trouble with those voters. The debate is just enormous. I was going to say ginormous and mix my words there. The debate, people still don't really know the vice president, so she does have more of a canvas to fill in, but Trump is rushing to try to fill it in for her, and that's the biggest question in the campaign right now. Who wins that battle?
We want to talk about her filling in her resume for the people. Before we do, you mentioned New Hampshire in passing. I know it's not one of the states you polled, but I'm sure you've read that a former Republican state committee official has been dumped after he said, I believe in an email, that the Trump campaign has given up on New Hampshire. It's out of reach now. What are you hearing about New Hampshire?
Well, look, the Trump campaign says, of course not, which is why he is now persona non grata. But look, his penalty here is for speaking the truth. Just follow, when you guys go home tonight, turn on the TV. When you're listening to non-public radio where people can run political ads, listen to the radio. Is Trump advertising in New Hampshire? Right after the debate with Biden, there was talk then, wow, New Hampshire might be back in play, Virginia might be back in play, even places like New Mexico and Colorado might be back in play. But once the switch happened, Harris has pulled in the base. Hillary Clinton won New Hampshire just narrowly. Joe Biden won it by even more. Does Trump have a fervent base in New Hampshire? Absolutely. But with what I just went through in the 6 battleground states with the much bigger electoral vote baskets, Can he afford to be trying to win New Hampshire, which is a big uphill state for him? It's not happening. So the volunteer essentially told the truth and got penalized for it because you're not supposed to say those things. But if you see Donald Trump up on Boston television, then you'll know he's competing in New Hampshire, and he is not.
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't seen him at all. One thing you also talked about last night on CNN was Harris' gender gap with women. I know that for young women, abortion is huge, and so she's doing pretty well with them, but that she's doing better with men than might be expected and not so well with women?
Well, in our latest polling, this is a question we're going to look at, obviously, because we lived through this in 2016. With Hillary Clinton, you had the giant gender gap between women and how women voted and how men voted. I was just going through this in our battleground states. Forgive me looking aside. I'm pulling up the notes that I wrote down about all this right now. And among women, she's essentially tracking Biden or doing a little better than Biden 2020. So she's about on track. If you look at the Biden coalition, which is plenty to win the White House, right? If she can match that coalition, she's the next president of the United States. She tends to be tracking or doing a little bit better than Biden among women. Where she tends to have a problem is her out in Arizona, for example. Biden won women by only 3 points in Arizona. It's one of those Western states where voting for president, it has Republican DNA. Ruben Gallego, the Senate candidate, is doing great among women. Kamala Harris is only +3 among women in Arizona. She's in double digits in all of the other battleground states. It's really an interesting sort of the Western culture about who we want to be our president out there. But among men is where she's having a problem. Where her numbers, again, only in a couple of the battleground states. I don't want to speak generally now because in some states she's doing fine. I mean, she's losing to Trump, but she's running about where Biden was, which is, it's all about the margins. But in a couple of places, Nevada in particular, where the economy was punished during COVID, out in Arizona as well, you see Trump with a bigger advantage over Harris among men right now than Biden, than he had over Biden in 2020. I trace almost all of this back to not knowing her very well, questions about her leadership, and most importantly, questions about the economy.
John, speaking of not knowing her very well and the importance of the debate, she obviously gave she and Tim Walz gave their first major interview since being the nominees of their party to Dana Bash on CNN. Generally, I think she got pretty good reviews. I have to say, I was not wildly impressed. I mean, I was saying to Marjorie the day after, the first question, which was so obvious, which is, what are you going to do on day one? And she was asked it once and then again, and she really couldn't answer the question. And so I thought it was fine, but not spectacular. How did it land, in your estimation, as best you can tell?
I think based on all the reaction we're seeing and then the very close competitive polling I just went through, I think you're about right. That answer did strike me as well. I talk about how I always talk about all politicians. I study them as to how they grow. And there is no question she is a much better candidate now than she was in 2020. But I think you hit there on one of the still weaknesses or rooms for improvement in that she was a senator. She was an attorney general. She was actually a chief executive of that office, if you will. But she spoke very much like a senator there. What am I going to do on day one? And again, I've seen people kick around that question. I think it was Bill Maher, for example, said, "Well, what a stupid question." Look, everybody can have their opinion about questions, but it does help you get to somebody's priorities when you ask that question. And I think Bill Maher's joke was, well, I'm going to walk in the parade, then I'm going to change and take a deep breath and go to the parties. Which if you want to give that answer and be funny, give that answer and be funny. But you could say, I'm going to send my economic plan up to Congress. I'm going to send my immigration plan up to Congress.
Exactly.
I'm going to talk to the American people about X, Y, or Z. And she didn't. And so she's there. She sounded very much like a senator, not like a chief executive.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that her staff, talked about that with her, and so let's see what happens the next time she's asked that question. That's how I judge them. As I say all the time, you're going to fall down, you're going to make mistakes. The challenge is how do you deal with them?
We're talking to John King from CNN.
Well, one of the things that drove me crazy, and it drove me crazy with Hillary Clinton too, and again with Biden, was talking about the unemployment rate and the number of jobs created. Because as I think Harris has been addressing, none of it matters if you're you can't pay the groceries, you can't pay the rent, you can't pay the child care, all those kind of things. You can't pay for housing. And she seems to be much more in that it's too expensive to live mode, I think, than Biden, which I think is a good thing because, if it doesn't matter if you're employed if you can't afford anything.
Yeah, I just beat her up a bit on the answer to what would you do on day one. I agree with you on this one, Marjorie, in the sense that they are actually tracking. How many times have I said to you guys about coming back from a trip where people are talking about the cost of housing? Even families who are doing pretty well, who can't sell the house they have. They've had kids, they want to move into a bigger house, but they can't sell the house they have, even though they would make a profit on it, because mortgage rates were high and the prices have gone up. So if they try to buy a bigger house, they just can't make the math work. So I think it's smart of her to focus on the housing piece of inflation, because especially for working families, working class people, where again, Donald Trump's probably going to win. White working class people in most of the battleground states, but it's all about the margins, right? Can you improve your standing there? Can you relate to them on issues? There are a whole lot of people out there. Let's just be honest. Here's how I sum the election. There are more than enough people who do not want Trump back in the White House, but are not yet convinced that Kamala Harris is their president.
Yeah.
And so that's who she's competing for. And one of the big issues with those people is housing costs and continued inflation and other things. And look, you can get dizzy trying to figure out economic indicators right now. The market's had a good month, and now they've had a tough, bad days. We're going to get a jobs report on Friday, and then we're going to get a Fed interest rate cut decision in a couple days down the road. And so you can get dizzy in deciding which is your economic indicator, and that can be wildly different among different voters. For some, it might still be the price of gas because they drive long distances. For many, it is housing. For some families, it's still groceries. For those who have a 401k, and maybe you're in their 50s or close to 60, when the stock market jumps up and down, it gives you anxiety. So every voter is different, and the economic data is so mixed right now, sometimes contradictory. It's hard to figure that one out, which is why she is smart to A, better explain her views, and B, for any of the candidates, not taking sides, for any of the candidates, I can just tell you from my travels, the housing thing matters a lot.
So abortion matters a lot too, John King. And I was trying to figure out how many times in the last 10 years have Marjorie and I said to you, no other candidate in presidential election history could get away with this, but then there's Donald Trump. So Donald Trump one day says he's troubled by the 6-week abortion, the heartbeat bill in Florida. I believe that was about the same time that he said he'd be the best president in history for reproductive rights, reproductive freedom for women. And then another day later, he said he's going to vote against the ballot question in Florida that would allow abortion up to, and I'm not talking about exceptions at the moment, up to viability. Almost every day he's got a different position depending upon who he's talking to. Could that possibly work with the constituencies, the anti-choice constituencies? He's trying to say, I'm still with you, don't worry. And pro-choice constituencies that he's not going to win, but he hopes that he won't be slaughtered by Harris. It can't work, can it?
Well, if you asked in the context of Trump, that's one of our questions as we watch it play out. Let me add into that on the related issue of IVF. Right. Now he says either the federal government will pay for it or he will mandate that insurance companies pay for it. Didn't the Reagan Republican Party be opposed to government run and mandates on the business community? So that's not a Republican position either, or not an orthodox Republican position. Look, he's all over the map, to borrow a phrase that I like very much on these issues. Here's the challenge, I think. Arizona is one of 10 states so far where you do have an abortion referendum on the ballot. The Democrats are hoping that drives up turnout for them. It brings a lot of voters, a lot of Republican-leaning voters who don't think the government or judges should be telling women what to do with their bodies. It brings them out to the polls. It's in, I think, 65% support in our new poll. I've seen it even higher in some other polling out there. But right now, it's the fourth issue when you ask Arizona voters what's the top issue in the campaign, because the economy dominates by so much. If Harris can bring down the gap on the economy, maybe she doesn't pass Trump, but just get more competitive with Trump on who's best to handle the economy, then you can get voters to turn to other issues because they're not stuck on the economy thing. And that's her challenge, because it's an issue that should help the Democrats. You're absolutely right, Jim. It's not a hard ad to cut the hypocrisy ad or really make a decision. And, again, I applaud people who have the courage to change their mind and raise their hand and explain why they changed their mind. But on this issue, Trump changes his mind depending on who he's talking to. You're absolutely right. It's not like it's not like, oh, I thought more about this, or oh, I met with this person, or oh, I saw this data. It's who am I talking to right now, or who's mad at me right now. So let me say what you want to hear. And then the other side gets mad at him and he goes and says the other thing. And that's pretty easy to point out in an ad, that he has been rather hypocritical or spinning like a top on this. But she needs to make it an issue of high enough priority that if you make that point, it makes a difference.
I think Trump has said that he would like to be setting interest rates himself or taking over the Fed or whatever he said, something like that. And obviously, interest rates have a huge impact on the economy. But it's kind of been one of those truisms you hear over the years that presidents really don't have that much to do with the economy. It's kind of other factors beyond them. And yet we all vote like they can snap their fingers and change things.
Yes, it's usually the number one issue. My second campaign was 1992 when George H.W. Bush, remember, we had a pretty mild recession, all things considered, but you had Bill Clinton and Ross Perot running around the country saying the economy was in the tank and it was all Bush's fault. And by this time in the campaign, the numbers had actually gotten a lot better. This time, I think the numbers are more confusing. The American economy is the strongest in the world. There is no doubt about that. The American economy has come out of the COVID and the global and the Middle East turmoil, too, the energy turmoil, the Ukraine war energy turmoil. The American economy has withstood that better than any of the advanced economies in the world. That's a fact. But when you look at unemployment rates, you look at interest rates, you look at inflation, you look at some of the other, whack-a-mole indicators that I would say, some are up, some are down, you get the confusion out there. And you're right. You can make a strong case that what does a president have to do with it? The Republicans would argue that some of the spending by Biden, early on, exacerbated it a bit. Okay, fair debate. Make your point. Make your point. Let's have a debate. I hope that comes up in the debate. I hope the two candidates, go back and forth about, spending and the likes. But you are right that presidents have less control over the economy than sometimes voters hold them accountable for. Whether it's re-electing a Bill Clinton because the economy's booming, or kicking somebody out like a George H.W. Bush because you feel it's not. But welcome to life and welcome to politics. It's not always fair.
John, talking about your travels, and we tell you, which they have been really useful to us, and I assume as useful to viewers of CNN, they really get down to the ground level and meet real people on all sides. We've been critical more than once in the mainstream media for ignoring, when writing about Trump, the felonies, the civil liability found around what essentially was rape of E. Jean Carroll, the massive business fraud this past week, reposting something, I said the word the other day, the fellatio reposting around Clinton and Harris. Is this, with the exception of that, which is this, is when you travel around the country, is all this ancient history when you talk to people, or almost not even part of the mix? Who's going to bring down the price of gasoline? Who's going to make sure that we're, quote, not overrun by invasions, to use Trump's terms? Is all this other, I don't even know if I want to call it character stuff, is all this other stuff, the felonies, the whatever, is it sort of like backbenched, for lack of a better expression?
I think that's a good expression. I would say suppressed in some ways. And again, every voter is different, so I get hesitant about overgeneralizing here. But we do meet a lot of voters who have Republican-leaning DNA, who maybe voted for Biden in 2020 because they couldn't take Trump anymore, who maybe supported Nikki Haley in the primaries because they didn't want Trump to continue to lead the Republican Party, who, when you talk to them about that stuff, it gnaws at them. They're predominantly women. It just gnaws at them, his personal character. Whether some of them don't agree, believe all of it, but there's enough of it. They'll say something like, look, there's enough of it that there's something there, things like that. And yet you will see them sometimes slip into transactional mode. And one of the things that Trump and his friends, forgive me, even before Trump at Fox News, have helped create this environment where they're all crooked in one way or another.
Yeah. I hear that all the time.
And so therefore, okay, so Trump, this is Trump's problem, but the other guy has this problem, or the other one has that problem. And I saw people out there are already throwing things at the radio or swerving in traffic if they're in the car, saying, don't do this whataboutism. And I'm actually with you on that. We shouldn't do the whataboutism. I'm just saying that climate exists out there when you talk to voters. Well, what about Hunter Biden? What about this? And what about that? And I always try to say, well, okay, I'm not a fan of what Hunter Biden did. Not at all. However, that's one thing on a list. And then you take this Trump list and it's a lot longer, isn't it? And so how do you weigh all that? But I will say that some voters become transactional. They think they're all bums, or they're so worried about the economy or so worried about the border, they're willing to, quote unquote, put up with that. Let me come back to what I think is the key issue here. There's enough of America in the suburbs that does not want Donald Trump back in the White House. Kamala Harris has to prove, whether it's leadership, whether it's economy, whatever it is for those voters out there, she has the opportunity. You see it in the data, even in the places where she's a little behind. There's the opening. Moderates and independents are by a much higher percentage than anyone else in the electorate open to changing their mind still. There's a much larger slice. When it was Biden and Trump, nobody was open to changing their mind. Everybody had made up their mind. They were kind of disgusted, but they'd made up their mind. Because of this new race in the short calendar, there's a big enough slice out there open to changing their mind. Her challenge is to prove she can be president. And for some, that's an economic question. For some, it's a leadership question. For some, it's a combination of those things question. But which is why I just keep coming back to this debate. I think it's the most important couple of hours of her life by far. Look, the Biden-Trump debate changed the track of this year, this election year. I believe the Harris-Trump debate can do the same.
Well, I hope she gets a question about climate, because I'm obsessed with climate change. I know a lot of young people, my children, their friends are really upset about climate. You hear these, we just read last week about sludge is poisoning the cattle out in the Midwest because it's full of those forever chemicals and
PFAS.
All these, PFAS things, PFAS things, they call them PFAS, and all these beaches down the Cape and lakes closed and fires and floods and stuff. I often wonder about that with Trump. I mean, if people don't, because he's a climate change denier, he will do everything he can to undo everything that Biden has done on climate. Some things he won't be able to undo, but still, it surprises me that, I think, am I crazy? Why does this seem to be such a back burner issue when we're looking at this disaster unfolding all around us? Even up in Montpelier, Vermont, they get flooded out up there.
It strikes me as an issue somewhat like Obamacare did when they first passed it, and it hurt Democrats for a couple of cycles because the opponents were able to focus on the negatives, the change, the disruption.
Yeah.
And so you see Trump allies talking about, well, if you build more electric cars, you're going to put people out of work, or what are you going to do about energy production? What are you going to do about that? Or government mandates or government spending. And so you have people who focus on, things they think they understand better, and it drives them away. And then you get further down the road when people actually see things making a difference. But I do think it's an issue that matters. It should matter to all voters. We know it matters to younger voters. And that's, again, one of Harris's soft spots in some of the battleground states, largely because of the Israel-Palestine, the Israel-Hamas conflict, that voters are mad, thinking that the Biden administration, and they include Harris in this, has their thumb on the scale in favor of Israel. Young voters are mad. This is what we see it play out on campus. I'm really fascinated to see now that we're back in the school year. Does it have the same intensity it has at the end? But you're certainly right. And again, just as to what to do about it, I wish we would have a policy debate. How much of it is the government? How much of it is the business sector? How much of it is, global? How much of it is unique to the United States? I would love to. I don't pretend to be smart enough to understand. I have an older son who gets in my grill about this all the time because he's a scientist and he's very, very smart about it. You should have him on sometime. But I would like to actually see them debate the issue on this. But I do think when you have one candidate who says it's a giant problem and we have to deal with it, and another one who somehow can say it's non-existent, it's a hoax, that in and of itself, if you're undecided out there, you pick your issue. There are pretty clear contrasts between these two candidates, big issues and how they would approach things. And so, for anyone who says, oh, there's no difference between them, I'm sorry, you need to take a deep breath and look again because there are big differences.
John, I don't know if this is useful, but it's interesting to me. Jonathan Martin, who I know you know, formerly New York Times, now Politico, wrote a piece saying that there are a ton of big-time Republicans, not the never-Trumpers, but other Republicans who privately are praying that Trump does not win the presidency so they have an opportunity to reshape their party back to at least semi-sanity in a post-Trump era. Do you experience that off the air with Republican leaders, some Republican leaders?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the voters are way out ahead of them. I meet all these former Reagan Republicans and Haley Republicans and Bush Republicans who are just apoplectic is what has happened to their party because they don't think it's about anything anymore. They think it's just about Trump. It's not about lower taxes. It's not about standing up to the communists. It's not about less regulation, whether you agree or disagree with those things. The Republican Party used to know at least what it stood for and where it was going to plant its flag and where it was going to fight. Yes, you hear that in Washington. Look, we've been hearing that in Washington since he came down that escalator and since he mowed Jeb Bush and Chris Christie and everybody else out of the race in the 2016 primaries. And again, here's what I would say. It's very real, privately, off the record. And I would just say, again, the reason it's off the record is because they don't have the courage to stand up and say it publicly, which is why he keeps winning.
Okay, so before you go, you said at the beginning of this discussion the pennies should be done with Are your Red Sox done with, John King?
Look, again, I'm in the math business, right? I count votes on election nights. I look at polling and all this stuff. Kansas City has been trying. They've been losing every single day for the last 2 weeks. It's like a turkey on a platter. Here, have some free lunch, Boston. And we keep shoving it out of the way. So, yeah, we're done. Yeah.
Boy, I've never heard you so down. Hey, John, your work's been fabulous.
A better than expected year, but I was hopeful there was going to be some magic, but no.
So was I. John, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. John King from CNN.
I've been speaking with CNN's John King, as Jim just said. He's the host of All Over the Map and the Battleground, where he goes out and talks to real people about their opinions on the issues, and it's fascinating stuff. Up next, we'll open the lines about what we were just talking about as well, the United States penny. Who even uses change anymore? Did we all just give up on coins after the great coin shortage of the COVID pandemic? Is it time? As a 15-page piece in the New York Times asked to ditch the copper coin, the penny. You're next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, actor and author Marianne Leone. In her latest book, 5 Dog Epiphany, she writes about her rescue dogs and how they ended up rescuing her. From there, we head to Cambridge to hear how a nonprofit is contributing to the future of hip-hop. And with the presidential election on the horizon, we look at the design of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. That's on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Boston Lyric Opera, presenting Mozart's Mitridate. Passion and politics collide in this rarely performed work. September 13th and 15th at the Emerson Cutler Majestic Theater. Tickets at blo.org. And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Conjuring the Spirit World. Art, Magic, and Mediums. Open September 14th. For tickets and more information, you can visit pem.org/spiritworld.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. One more time, Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us tomorrow in Brighton. Friday, the governor joins us from 1 to 2 here at the library. And Tuesday, the mayor, Mayor Wu, joins us for an hour. I think it's 11 to 12, I'm not sure. But it's Tuesday for Ask the Mayor. You know, most pennies in America are doled out as change and never spent. They end up in the nation's couch cushions, piggy banks, street corners, and those novelty tourist penny flatteners, I've done that somehow cost $5. The cultural penny vacuum results in this massive overproduction of pennies, again, because nobody spends them, just to replace cashier tills and provide proper change. So the lines are open at 877-301-8970. Katie Weaver writes in this incredibly long but fabulous piece in the New York Times Magazine, should we, quote, free ourselves from the tyranny of the penny? John King has spoken. Now it's your turn. 877-301-8970. Even if you don't pay in cash anymore, or you do pay in cash, what do you do with the pennies you're given as change? Have you noticed stores are just rounding up to dollar amounts to avoid dealing with coins altogether? And by the way, do you bend down, if you see a penny, do you bend down anymore to pick the penny up?
Gosh, I can't remember the last time I saw a penny on the sidewalk.
In any case, 877-301-8970. You said this earlier. In this voluminous piece in the New York Times, she mentions it costs 3 cents to make a penny, which costs us, taxpayers, roughly $100 million a year. And this great quote, which I don't have right in front of me, from Barack Obama, who also wanted to get rid of the penny, said this is symptomatic or sort of a metaphor.
Yeah, it's right here.
Oh, read it.
It's a good metaphor for some of Washington's larger problems. It's very hard to get rid of things that don't work, said Obama, adding that eliminating the penny is something a president, for example, Barack Obama,
since 2008 by doing the following.
Art Zen or something.
Making zinc blanks that mints stamp into pennies. I don't know what that means, but obviously they're a major lobbying force. But that's just from one county in one state in Tennessee. So it's not clear to me which is the constituency that is keeping the penny alive.
Here are a couple little more factoids from that piece. There are 240 billion pennies lying around the United States. About 724, or $7.24 for every man, woman, and child in the United States, plus enough to hand 2 pennies to every bewildered human being born since the dawn of man, which is unbelievable. And then they talk about how heavy pennies are, that just $100 worth of pennies weighs more than 55 pounds. I mean, that's incredible.
Well, speaking of that, by the way, it's interesting to say that. I don't know if we've mentioned, this piece is endless.
Yeah.
By Caitlin, what her name? Katie Weaver?
Her name is
whatever her name
Katie
is.
Weaver.
Okay, one of the things she does not address, do you remember growing up that there was this notion that if somebody went to the top of a tall building and dropped a penny and it hit you on the head,
go through your head.
It would kill you. It would go through your head.
Yeah, go through your head.
Why doesn't she address that?
I don't know. That's a very good question.
What do you think? I think if they dropped 100, what'd you say? 55 pounds of pennies, which is $100
worth of pennies.
That would probably
pounds.
kill you. Would you agree with that?
Maybe $1 worth of pennies, you might have a chance of surviving. But the old story we used to always hear is 1 penny. So you should be very careful not to throw any pennies off the tops of.
Well, except we don't know if it actually would kill you.
We don't know. But you don't want to find out, Jim. That's why you don't do it.
Okay, 877-301-8970. Let me just say one more time: War and Peace is shorter than this piece in the New York Times, but it is so cram-packed with fabulous things. You know, by the way, the one pro. What's that?
Jen from Miller says she throws them in the garden to keep pests away, and they're good nutrients for the soil. It helps hydrangeas blue color and keeps the bird bath bottom clean of algae.
Could you write back to her and ask her if you drop a penny from the top of a building, would it kill anything? Mythbusters. Oh my goodness, Zoe.
Oh, thank you.
They tested the killer penny thing. And they busted
Nicole
it, which
found
means, it was Nicole?
Yes, thank you.
you.
Oh, no, it was Zoe.
Whoever the hell it was, one of our colleagues.
Okay.
Apparently, is Mythbusters still in the air? It's not, is it?
I don't know.
It's a fabulous show.
Thomas from Fall River, thank you for calling.
Hello, Thomas, Fall River, hi.
Hello, how you doing?
I think
Fine,
we're good,
thank
you. Thanks.
I visited Australia in the year 2000, and they had already rounded up to the nickel.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that if you had 3 cents or more, you rounded it up to the nickel, and if you had 2 cents or less, you didn't have to spend any pennies.
How do you feel about that?
And it worked. It worked fabulously. Who misses the penny?
Well, you know, Marjorie has been too shy to say something that you just reminded me of. Her position this morning, which is rather radical, is we should not only get rid of the penny, we should get rid of the nickel. What do you think about that, Thomas? It's heavy, it's big. What do you think?
Dimes are much smaller. They don't weigh as much.
They are.
They're kind of
cute.
cute.
Won't kill you if they fall off a building.
Who's on the dime? Is it Truman?
I think it's Eisenhower.
Is it Eisenhower?
Maybe it's true. What's that again, Thomas?
I'm ready to hang on to the nickel. I roll up the coins and turn them back in pretty regularly.
Or you can go to that rip-off thing in the supermarket, Coinstar. You know that Coinstar thing?
Yeah.
Where you do or you don't?
I don't.
Where you go to the supermarket, you drop all your coins in the damn thing, and it takes like 7%, and you get a check or you get a thing.
Well, that's nice.
That didn't interest you at all.
Well,
Thomas, thank you very much for the call. FDR is on the dime. My apologies.
If it's $100 worth of pennies weighing 55 pounds, you have to get someone to help you drag them into the supermarket, I guess. Now they talk about
you don't have to bring in 100 pounds
you don't.
at a time.
You can bring fewer. You can absolutely bring fewer than that.
That's a good point.
Now, apparently we've been trying to tackle this problem for years. They say 48 years ago, the head of the Treasury Secretary said, he begged, please get rid of the 1 cent coins as soon as possible. And then 25 years ago, another guy who was director of the United States Mints, was pushing for the same thing, saying that 2/3 of the pennies produced in the last 30 years, that would be 1969 to 1999, had dropped out of circulation.
Well,
so why people just save them at home? They don't.
What are you going to do with them? What are you going to do?
Well, that's one of the points.
Yeah, when was the last time you spent a penny?
Well, yesterday, actually, I paid for something in cash. Yes, I did.
With
I bought
a penny?
some baking soda. No, I bought some baking soda because I just forgot it to get it, and I stopped at this convenience store. I got some baking soda, and I forget what it was. It was $3.97.
Well, you got ripped off.
Whatever, maybe it was $1.47.
Like 69 cents.
Okay, whatever it was, there was 3 pennies to round up to the dollar, and I didn't want to get a bunch of change. I didn't want to get, you know what I mean? So I gave the guy 3 cents.
Wow, that was
and
very
I got
generous.
back a couple of dollars, whatever it was. So I used some pennies just yesterday.
Well, let me tell you, that is the most confusing story I've ever heard.
I was very excited.
But let me say
about
this: when was the last time? I repeat. When was the last time you spent a penny? Oh, you consider that spending a penny?
No, I used the pennies exchange so I wouldn't have to get change back.
Oh, that's
more pennies
incredible.
back. I wanted to get a
Well,
dollar
if they rounded
back.
it up like on Australia. You know where else they don't have pennies anymore?
Where?
I learned in that story.
Australia.
No, he said Australia.
Oh.
Where did the story say? Did you read the story?
I didn't read all 17 pages.
Oh, you
I
didn't?
ran out
Okay.
of time.
Canada.
I made it up to page
Canada.
15.
Has Canada suffered as a result of getting rid of the
Not
penny?
that I know
Not
of.
that I know
have not
of
heard
either.
the Prime Minister Trudeau complain about that.
Let's go to Carolyn.
Now, and then there's this penny myths and facts. Did you get that far
I
in the
actually
story?
looked it up. It's not that interesting.
No, it is interesting.
What is it?
Well, people claim that the penny aids charities in raising all this money.
Well, it probably does.
Well, this reporter contacted the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which this guy described as relying significantly on small yet critical penny contributions.
Wow.
And here's what they found out.
What's that?
The society has discontinued physical coin collection programs because they've become too costly.
Wow.
You accused me of not finishing the story, Jim. You missed that part.
I didn't say I finished
And that
the
was
story.
only on page 6.
You know why?
Why?
Because it was voluminous. Let's go to Caroline in the South End. We're talking about the penny, the threat that it poses to mankind. Hi there, Caroline.
Hi.
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 I met you a couple of weeks ago.
Where?
And I told you I never used my real name. In the library.
Oh.
But I'm using my real name.
Okay.
You are? How do we know?
Yes, I am.
How do we... Nervous
my
laughter, I know what you mean.
It's Caroline with a K.
Oh,
Okay?
Oh,
love
okay.
that. That changes everything. So, okay, so what's your position on the penny thing?
I use pennies all the time, and we pick up pennies on the street all the time. And I saved enough pennies that I took them to be counted, and I had $3,000 worth of.
No, you did.
Oh,
I'm
come
sorry.
on.
That is not...
3,000?
Caroline with a K, that is not even
Okay, if
remotely
100
possible.
are worth... if 100 weigh
Wait a second.
55 pounds...
Forget that.
How much does 3,000
Forget pounds. $3,000
They're like
of
a
pennies
car.
is 300,000 pennies.
The machine broke.
What?
The machine broke several times.
And how
when I
long
was
did it collect?
processing.
Wait, how did you collect 300,000 pennies, Caroline with a K?
It took years, and also my husband found a Liberty Tree penny that's worth $1,500.
Wow.
So now, did
He
you
likes
put
to
them
pick
on
up
a...
pennies on the street.
Did you put them on a sled and drag them to
very
the
good
store?
question.
How did you carry
No,
this
I
out?
took them in installments.
Uh-huh.
took them in installments.
Okay.
Because it took, I also do the same thing with my quarters that I get from laundry machines.
You know, Caroline, I feel bad because I impugned your integrity, and actually our colleagues have a clip of you finding a penny on the ground. Here it is.
Is that what I think it is? I found a penny!
That's Homer with an H, actually. Caroline, do you have any photographs of you taking in $3,000 of pennies to wherever?
Well, I took it to the Star Market, and seriously, I was freaking out when the machine crashed, and it was saying that I had like 1,500 pennies and, 1,700 pennies, and the machine broke, so I had to go to customer service, and I had to tell them, and I'm like, how do I know I'm going to get this money after the machine broke?
What happened?
They ran a program to load everything. It runs on Windows.
That was a really uplifting story. So you got $3,000 for the pennies.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Caroline, thank you. Call us again. We appreciate it.
Okay. Don't take the pennies. You'll break my husband's heart. He collects them all year long, then rolls them up, cashes them in, and buys himself scratchers. I guess that means scratch tickets.
Yeah.
I think the rolling is a meditative, calming thing for my husband.
Don't think you could do something a little more useful than rolling up the pennies?
Well,
and the thing?
listen to Kelly and Newton.
What'd she say?
I pick up
Or he
every
or they?
coin I see in the ground. I'm
Oh
a
my
dog
God.
walker, so I spend a lot of time staring at the ground. I save all the money I find and cash it in every 5 years or so. Once I bought a bike with cashed in coins, and the last time I cashed in everything, I bought my couch. Every penny counts.
Well, by the way, wasn't the line Oliver North? Remember Oliver North?
Was he picking up pennies on the ground?
Didn't he say, Jamie, can you check this out? Didn't Oliver North say that by coin collecting, he was able to pay for the security fence, which was a lie, outside his house? I think that's right, actually.
I don't know.
And by the way, in the era when we actually used cash, which wasn't so long ago, I used to I used to save change and cash it in. Not 300,000 pennies like Caroline, Did you do that or you didn't do that?
Well, when I was a kid,
Save
I had a
change.
piggy bank.
I don't mean as a kid. As an adult, 20 years ago. You didn't do that?
No, I never did that.
Well, it's too bad. It really is too bad. Anybody in Fall River? You know we haven't heard from in months, by the way?
Liliana.
Where the hell's Liliana, by the way?
don't know.
Liliana, if you are listening and you have a position on pennies, we would love to hear from you. Well, the lines are full, but 877-301-8971.
Here's a good one.
What?
How are we supposed to feel like we're paying less for something if we can't make it end in 99 cents?
That's a very good point, by the way.
Yeah, and somebody else said they're upper middle class, but they are cash kings, and all they do is pay for things in cash. So
Well, cash
they're
is
big
not-
in- they're
cash
big in-
is not
they're big into-
pennies.
They're big into pennies.
Well, they didn't say they're big into pennies. They're
Well,
big into
they're
cash.
big into cash.
Well, it's a different thing. Mary in Portsmouth.
Oh, listen to Jeff in Providence.
We'll get to you, Mary. Don't go
If
away.
I move to Canada, it will not be because of Donald Trump. It will be because we got rid of the penny.
I
Or
think-
they got rid of the penny, excuse
Whatever
me.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try again. Murray, you're somewhere in Rhode Island. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you. No, I'm from Portsmouth. And
Portsmouth.
I'm a retired Navy officer.
Oh, great.
Yep. And I've been running for years. I'm a runner, run Boston Marathon, ultra running.
Wow.
And I always find coins on the ground. But I have to tell you, in respect to all your other callers,
sure.
All the coins are disappearing. 10, 20 years ago, you would see a lot of coinage in parking lots and such. I don't find them as much anymore. And a lot of my kids say, coin? They don't know who's on a coin.
Or what
And
it
I
is.
think it's just time for us to get rid of the coin. And also, too, common sense. You're going to love this, Jim. Common sense isn't so common. I think that we need to get rid of this because back in the 1860s, 70s, we had a 3-cent coin.
We did?
We don't have a 3-cent coin anymore.
That is
We
correct.
just need to get rid of the penny. The Canadians are very smart to have gotten rid of the penny.
Murray,
We
before you
need to
go
do
away,
this, too.
you're arguing what we should have argued for, I think, which is forget the penny. Why do we have coins at all? They're heavy and cumbersome.
I agree.
Yeah, so why aren't we saying that?
Yeah, and besides, this past week, I was talking to my kids. I used my little debit card, that little thing where you tap.
I know what a debit card is, yeah.
It's wonderful. I'm free of all these coins.
Murray, I have two questions for you before I go away. You said to us when you're running a marathon, you stop and pick up change on the route. Is that what you said?
I used to, but there's no coins on the route anymore.
Well, that's so you're running a little faster.
I hope
And
you
secondly,
do more.
what do you think about people who use the word coinage like you do instead of coins, like signage as opposed to sign? What is that about?
Well, it just tells us that we are old, we're old school, and that's what it is.
Mary, you're a good
We're
caller.
old school.
Thanks so much for your call. We appreciate it.
Okay, the reason, according to this New York Times story, that we still have pennies, we have to blame someone. As
You're
usual,
reading
Jim.
this while we're on the air?
I believe no. I
You're
read
catching
it,
up
I
on
read
what
it
you-
before.
No, you didn't.
I guess you can see.
Oh,
I
you're
marked
holding it up. It
I
must
marked
be
it up
true
from
then.
before.
Okay,
That's right.
fine.
Okay, people blamed a lot of things: an uninterested Congress, highly interested lobbyists, and this
Mhm.
lobbyist from this company that makes the little mold. They
Tennessee
lobby
people, yeah.
to keep their penny business. To the sentimental get blamed. To people who are bad at math, they get blamed. To a populace willing to provide in perpetuity free private storage for pointless copper-plated tokens. And some people on the email, or on the text rather, are saying that they sell older pennies for the copper that was still in the older pennies. What do they make them from now?
How the hell do I know?
I don't know. You read the whole story.
Well, I
you
didn't
said.
read the whole story. I lied. And let me ask you, I did. Let me tell you one thing I did tell the truth about.
It was 17
Let's
pages.
not focus on that. It's
I
too
ran out of
long.
time.
I did too. Ran out of interest is what I ran out of.
I was
Can I
very
ask you something
interested.
else? What
Yep.
motivated you, because I don't know what motivated me, to put the penny in the squashing machine when you were younger? And it did cost like 3 or 4 or 5. Did you ever do it, Jamie, when you were a kid? Yeah, you did it too. Where you squash the penny, it becomes like an oval or a big pancake.
It
kind of
does?
thing. You never did that?
No.
You said you did that 10 minutes
No,
ago.
I didn't do that.
You didn't?
No, I had a piggy bank. That's what I said.
Oh, okay, fine.
But listen to this. Dorothy from Billerica says she uses a penny every day when he buys her coffee for $4.01.
What kind of place? Whether if you give them $4, they're not going to give you the coffee?
I don't know. You know, lots of times, if you notice, if you go to use cash, people have a little container of pennies
Yes, they
next
do.
to the cash register.
They don't much anymore.
And
They
sometimes
used to.
they don't want your
You
pennies.
take a penny from the thing.
I think a lot of people don't want your
Yeah.
pennies. Nicole was telling us beforehand, sometimes she gets in the tea, she'll low on cash with like hundreds of pennies, and of course the tea driver doesn't
Do you
want
believe people still do this? I did that when I
They
was a
don't-
kid.
they don't
Everybody
want
did
the
that when we were
pennies.
kids.
Yeah, they don't want the pennies.
I understand, but do you believe she's still doing this?
I've done that quite a bit.
I know, you did it like 30 years ago.
You
She did it last week.
You get on the T and you're fumbling around for your money, and the T
And they say,
driver
just go sit down.
Just go to sit down.
Let's
yeah.
talk to Phil Leung, the GM of the T on Monday. Rob, in Newmarket, New Hampshire, what's your deal? Oh, she did it in New York City, not on the T.
Hey, how are you?
She doesn't want to get arrested when Phil Leung's with us on Monday, apparently. Okay, so Rob, what's your story?
So I just told this story on my radio show, and I've never sure it was funny.
Oh.
Because I don't know whether people, what they think when they hear my stories on my radio show. But anyway, when I was a kid, little kid, Chatham, Mass, was the first place that we knew of where they had crosswalks where the traffic had to stop for you if you were in the crosswalk.
Yep.
So my cousin and I, we would fill our pockets with pennies. And we'd go out there in the middle of that crosswalk and drop every one of those pennies into that crosswalk. Oh, people would get it. So it would take us 5 minutes down on our hands and knees, picking them all up, laughing to ourselves the whole time.
Now, Rob, I don't know if you know the word.
We thought we were.
I'm sure you did. Now, Rob, the word on the street is you have a radio show. Is that true or is that not true?
Yes, that's true, I do.
Where do you have a radio show? We're trying to help our fellow radioites. Where do you have a radio show?
Oh, well, thank you. Portsmouth Community Radio in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Saturdays from 4 to 6.
What's the number there? What are you on the dial?
It's 106.1 FM, but we're an LP station, so it only travels down to like the Hampton Tolls.
Oh,
so you
okay.
can stream it at the.
Well, you can use the pennies at the Hampton Tolls, so it's perfect. Rob, good luck with the radio show, and we're really glad you called. Thank you for your time here. Appreciate it.
One major issue that the naysayers have about getting rid of the penny is, you know who's on the penny? Abraham Lincoln.
He is
on the penny. And everybody loves Abraham Lincoln.
Do you think Abraham Lincoln would have cared if he was on the penny?
Well, we have a
Should we read
solution
there's a new
here.
book about Abraham. We should talk to Doris Kearns Goodwin. Is Doris Kearns Goodwin with us next week?
Going to come on to talk about
next
her
week?
new book.
No, not only
about
her
the
new
four
book.
young men that grew up to be presidents.
No, also there's a new book about his relation. You know, we know that he slept in the same bed with men because that was a sort of a thing of the times. But at least the implication of this other book is that he was bisexual. And we'll see what Doris has to say about this.
I thought in her book about Lincoln, she said it was just the custom of the
I
times.
know.
And they didn't have enough money, so people stayed in the same bed.
That's why I'd like
But
her
maybe
reaction.
Maybe he was bisexual. I have no
By the way,
idea.
someone says he can pay just 25 cents to flatten a penny. That'd be incredible.
Oh, no.
Really, Jim? Okay, Morningstar in a car. Is that your name, Morningstar?
Hi. Yes, that is my name.
That's fabulous.
Yes.
That's great. What's up, Morningstar?
Thank you. Well, I just found it a little annoying initially. The whole discussion started out with somebody writing a 17-page paper about abolishing, the penny. They must have a lot of time to do things like that.
It's actually a great piece. A little long, but it's really well done.
It's in the magazine. It's a magazine piece, I should say, in the New York Times. It's not in the regular paper.
Okay, so what's your point there?
But I wanted to put in my word for, yes, I like the penny because I can get a lot of change, and I guess you could call me on the lower side of the income level. So, there's change in my car, there's change on the floor, and every time my niece comes in the car, she picks it all up and puts it in a little baggie, and I save a little jar. But it certainly doesn't amount to $3,000 at about, $20. I'm ready to take the jar to the bank and throw it in the change thing, and it costs nothing, and it seems like I get, free $20 or $40 to spend.
Well, we're glad you're the last call because that's actually a point of view that hasn't been expressed here. Well, I guess the $3,000 woman, Caroline, did with a K, but we're glad you did it too. Morningstar, thank you for your call.
You were worried about what you hadn't heard from Liliana from Fall River for a while. Well, Bill in Bridgewater says he just spoke with Liliana, and she said she saves all her coins, including pennies, and at the end of the year, she buys herself one great prosciutto.
By the way, if you don't know how Liliana came on our show, that won't make sense, but figure it out. Okay, is Jared with us or Jared's not with us? Jared, are you there? Oh, you are there.
Here. Hi,
Jared, we already heard what's on your show, so we're really not that interested. But we are sort of interested. Marianne Leone and
Yeah, you
James.
know what do you see what I'm holding up here?
No, we can't see you at all.
We can't see you.
Well,
What are you holding up, a penny?
I'm holding up lemon squares from Marianne Leone.
Oh, that is painful.
-3 because I already ate them.
They are the best, by the way. She is not only a wonderful actor, she is the best lemon square baker. Before we dismiss you, Jared, you have a wonderful show coming up. Where are you on the penny?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
I think it's time to go, isn't it? I was just having this thought the other day, just like your last caller. I have I like so many people. I think I have a bottle at home with all my spare change, and I realized this is now never going to be filled again in my lifetime because we don't use money anymore.
Wow.
Well, cash.
Well, I'm glad we know your point of view. Okay, so Marianne Leone's got a new book. She's fabulous. James Cameron's talking about something, and somebody else is talking about something else. Is that right?
Yeah, we have James Cameron on the show, exactly.
Okay.
Titanic, Redux.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, did I say James Cameron? I meant James Bennett. I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you were being funny, yes.
I wasn't being
I
funny.
thought you really had James
I am
Cameron.
really-
Oh, well.
See, we're at that caliber already.
Thank
Just
God
9
the
months
show
into the
is
show.
over.
Yeah, we have the best
fine.
guest.
Thank you. You really, it's incredible. Avatar was pretty good, dude. Tell him I love the second one.
Well,
Thank
pass
you.
it along.
Okay, enough of you. Goodbye. See you, Jared. Listen to his show at 2 o'clock. Okay?
Bye, Jared.
Okay, bye, Jared.
What's interesting?